We are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vasinda. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy in the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our big hope and desire is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games and help amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but my favorite way to do that, the most fun way to do that, is to sit down with those designers and play those games. We are in the middle of our first ever two-part series here on Plus One EXP, playing The Between with Jason Cordova. Jason, for people who aren't with us yesterday, who are just catching this video, why don't you tell us a little bit about The Between?
Sure. So The Between is a game about monster hunters in Victorian-era London. It is inspired by the TV show Penny Dreadful, directly inspired, but it takes inspirations from other things like British horror classics and graphic novels like From Hell and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And mechanically, it's based off of Apocalypse World, but also my other game, Brindlewood Bay. It uses the mystery system of Brindlewood Bay.
Awesome. Well, I am super excited to play. Had an absolute blast playing yesterday. Let's meet our two other players. Let's start with Sean today. Sean, tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find you online.
Excellent. Hello, Internet. I am Sean F. Smith. I'm a mind reader, a games designer, an author, all manner of different things. I mostly exist online at Sean F. Smith on places with various numbers of underscores between, depending on how quickly I got to the actual different platform. And as someone who primarily plays and designs horror games, such as my Exuvier, which you can pick up now in digital format, and some places in physical format if you're sufficiently close to England, I suppose. And so as somebody who really loves horror games, I am particularly excited to see more of this grim gothicness. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. I am also, since we're in round two, as long as it's all right with Jason, why don't you tell people who you are playing, because we did slow character intro yesterday, but I think we're going right into the action today. And so go ahead and tell us a little bit about your character.
So today I'm playing Bran Pincryer, who is almost looks like a very windswept Ernest Hemingway, kind of like long scuffed up duster coat, like a load of sort of like scars that almost like standing out on the side of his neck, properly windswept hair. He's been a bit direct so far. He also accidentally has given a beggar on the street far too much blood to drink from his own vial, his own hip flask, which he wasn't entirely expecting to be full of blood. And I've functionally been the B plot in the first plot of the first part of the story today, going after all of the clues, and making friends with some bloodless chap who's just thrown himself through a window. So yeah, that's myself.
Awesome. Let's hop over to Max. Max, tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find you online, and a little bit about who you're playing.
Yeah, hi. I am Max Lander. You can find me online most places at Maxwell Lander. Either Twitch and Twitter is great. Someday that may change. I may change my Twitter handle because it's always difficult. So find me on Twitter and then help me pick what I should change that to. I am a game designer and other kind of artist. I am playing Francis Roble, who is very good looking, very well coordinated, does a really good twirl, and has maybe taunted a ghost. And may pay some kind of price for it today.
Awesome. Excellent. By the way, I dropped everybody's social media contact as well as their current projects, or Exuvier in Sean's case specifically, in the chat below. So if you want to connect with any of these people, hop on all that. For me, again, you can always find me at Plus One EXP. You can also check out the project that I'll be talking about for most of this month, 13 Hunters at ttrpg.link /13H. It's Dom Leote's science fantasy compilation, totally system agnostic, bounty hunter supplement. It is tremendously gorgeous and incredibly smartly put together. I would say it's a must pick up for Zine month, but also I'm incredibly biased and have an incredible amount of issues in saying that without clarifying that I am co-publishing that book. You can check all that stuff out, though. I've been playing Liam Thop. Liam is, if my Google search history for images has anything to say about it, a dirty, sexy scamp. I'm playing the Vessel, which means that there are dark forces that are constantly on my periphery trying to seduce me, and that in every way, shape, and form want to be inside me. I had an absolute blast getting to know Constance Head, the nosy neighbor, in a way that apparently very few people ever do when playing The Between yesterday, by which I mean we had a lovely evening together. And so I also am not always well put together, but do manage to twirl around fancily every once in a while. With that said, we just belied the fact that we just made it sound super delightful. We made it sound like a cozy slice of life Victorian event, except for the blood drinking. It's not. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jason Cordova to take us into The Between.
Fabulous. Okay, so session 2. The first thing we always do at the beginning of a second session and onward is to do a recap. And so if you want to follow along, you can click on the Threats tab on the Character Keeper. And our current active threat is the St. James's Street Ghost. Now, this is a case whereby several months ago, according to a Penny Dreadful that you read, a back issue, a young housekeeper, Jenny Hess, was found dead, apparently from shock. And there was a detail in the story about flickering gas lamps, which convinced you all that this was a legitimate haunting, legitimate ghostly activity. The tabloid said it was a ghost, but they say all kinds of things all the time that aren't real. And so you all are looking into this. There are 2 questions associated with the St. James's Street ghost. The first is, which part of the house is the ghost attached to? And that's a complexity 4. And what it does is it would unlock a move called Old Bones. That would be a move that all characters could use for the remainder of the campaign. I probably wouldn't focus on that one for our 2-shot, but that is there. The second question, and the more relevant question I think for right now, is how can we get the ghost to move on to the next world? That's a complexity 6, and that allows you to resolve the threat by performing a quieting ritual if you answer the question correctly.
Excellent.
Now, you have 6 clues, and as I described last time, the clues are a little vague, a little unusual and surreal in some cases, and are ambiguous. And your goal is to make sense of them. And so you do that by triggering a move called Answer a Question. And whenever you're ready to do so, you can trigger the move. And then the 3 of you, more or less out of character, though theoretically the characters are saying it in character too, but you have a conversation about what you think is going on with this ghost and how you can get this ghost to chill out and move on to the afterlife. And so you have 6 clues currently towards that effort. There is no canonical solution. There's no canonical answer to the question. It really comes down to what you all decide upon, and then you roll some dice to see how you did, to see if you're correct. And yeah, so that's kind of where that stands. You have already used the aspect of the Janus mask for this one, which was the Mask of the Unquiet, where you have to narrate a haunting. Or no, you did not use that one. That's another game. You did not use that one. Apologies. I run this game a lot. The Mask of the Unquiet is still available. So that is the one where if you choose it in order to bump up a die roll, every hunter has to narrate a haunting from their childhood. Now,
and can you
so
use that? Can you use that even on a question roll?
No. Well, yes. Okay, so it's a little different when answer a question. It's a great question. For answer a question, because it's a sort of group roll, if you want to bump up the result of answer a question, everybody has to mark Janus Mask. So one person could mark the Mask of the Unquiet, but the other players would have to mark the Mask of the Past or the Mask of the Future.
Okay.
So yeah, because it's kind of a group roll, everybody has to chip in Janus Mask in order to bump up the result. But it's great though, because especially for this 2-shot, because if you roll poorly, you can all just mark Janus Mask and get it right. So that's a thing. I wrote down all the characters that are relevant to the mystery here on the threat sheet. And as part of the recap, I also want to talk about the mastermind. Your characters don't quite understand this aspect yet, but out of character, we know that the mastermind is in play. We met her, Mr. Pincryer specifically met her, this mysterious wealthy woman with the sapphire on her neck. And then we also saw her in her little stinger scene as well. And so you have one mastermind clue. That is a mastermind clue. Mastermind clues are different from regular clues because what they do is they function as a timer for the campaign. So as you collect mastermind clues, you hit these thresholds. And as you hit thresholds, the campaign vis-a-vis the mastermind becomes deeper and more dangerous. And the story starts to change from being hunting these monsters to contending with the mastermind's plot. And once you reach 15 mastermind clues, that triggers the end game where you face off against the mastermind in a sort of final face off. So, obviously in a 2-shot, that will be a super salient part of what we're doing, but it's there and it's fun.
Love it.
In terms of the characters, I think it's always helpful to go through and talk about their conditions. So right now, you each have at least one condition, and Mr. Roble has 2. Mr. Roble has the wax doll and a much better target. Liam Thop has marked by Constance head, and Mr. Pincryer has unsteady. So I'll remind you that the conditions can negatively affect your die rolls, and so they're good to get rid of for that reason. They also, once you get up to 3 and you have to take a 4th, you have to mark Janus Mask automatically, which long-term pushes your character towards retirement, right? So that is sort of where everything stands. There was a sort of non-threat related event with Mr. Pincryer that Sean alluded to, which is a vampire smashed through the window and then begged Mr. Pincryer to have permission to stay. And Mr. Pincryer granted it, and then we cut away. We don't know how that resolved, and that's on purpose. But I think we're going to probably find out when we start. So yeah, that's our recap.
Awesome.
Any questions or anything?
No, not for me.
I have vampire lore questions, but that is not. I'm excited to hear about how the vampire lore questions play out. I'm like, can you just say you can come in for 24 hours, or is that just a yes?
Who knows?
I will.
We'll find out.
That's right, because you gave him a time limit, didn't you? You were like,
until next,
you can enter until the next. So yeah.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but it could be different than what I think it is. And for stream sensibilities, it might even work a little bit differently. But we can theoretically answer a question anytime we have just half of the thing. There's not a phase we answered in.
No, it happens outside of the phase structure. You can just, whenever you all decide you want to do it, you can do it. You might decide you want to get more clues, because even if you worked in every clue to your theory, you'd be at a flat roll because it'd be 6 minus 6. So if you want to get a couple more clues and then try it, you can do that, or you can go for the flat roll too.
Is there a max cap you can use on clues?
No, but it'll start to get, part of the problem is your own personal brewing theory might get ponderous if there's all these like new things being added to it. So you may want to stop at a certain point, like, okay, before this gets too out of control, let's say what we think is happening. So, but no, there's not. You could, I guess you could theoretically get +3, +4, I suppose. But
okay.
So we'll start with the day phase if everyone's ready.
Yeah.
And the first thing that you do is, if there are less than 3 active threats, the keeper introduces a brand new one. Now, I said yesterday I wasn't going to introduce any brand new threats because this is just a 2-shot, but I changed my mind because I think that it would be fun to just experience the game as it's meant to be played, even if we don't get to see everything. So we shall have a new threat, and you can follow along on the threat tab, players. And the new threat is called the Limehouse Lurker. Jenny Johnston, the proprietor of an opium den in Limehouse, which is a neighborhood in East London, she tells you a story that has not yet reached Scotland Yard or the papers. 3 people have been found dead in recent days, the bodies completely exsanguinated. The first was a sex worker called Soft Jimmy. He was found in a dark corner of the opium den. The second was a young mother, Charla Bell. She was found in an alleyway behind the Limehouse School, which is a workhouse. And the third was a Chinese sailor, Zhao Donghai. He was found in a pub near the Regent's Canal dock. This pub is called the Dog and Whistle. Jenny, an informal community leader in Limehouse, has been keeping the bodies in her basement. She's hesitant to go to the authorities because she fears it will cause trouble for the small but thriving Chinese immigrant community in the district, of which she's a part, by the way. She heard that Hargrave House has experience with these matters, or matters like this, and has asked for your help. And here I need to know, between all three of you, who has the highest reason score?
Not it.
I think it's Mr. Thop.
Oh yeah, I only have 1 in it, but I do have 1 in it.
Yeah, it's better than 0 and -1.
You haven't known.
Liam, Hargrave House knows about creatures that drink the blood of their victims. They're called vampires. In fact, there's one staying upstairs right now. So
Surely that won't
experience with
come into play
vampires.
at all now.
A detail in Jenny's story convinces you that this particular vampire has the body of a small child. Doesn't mean it's a child, but it is in a small package. What's the detail?
I think that it is really just very practically about reach. Each of these people was bitten around the midsection, near the. I'm trying to think anatomically, and it doesn't matter. Near the hip bone, and
The artery in the thigh is like
yeah.
as dangerous as the neck, right?
Yeah.
So
And so, and which you know, to me implies that they are not. We're not capable of reaching any higher, since it was consistent on all 3 bodies.
Fabulous. The vampire is physically a child, but that doesn't mean it's young. Vampires, of course, never physically age beyond how old they were when they returned, and an old vampire has to be handled in a very different manner from a young one. And so your question is a threshold question that you have to answer before you can go any further, which is,
That's cool.
is the vampire young or old? And it's a complexity 4. And if you answer it correctly, it unlocks the next question, depending on how the answer goes. So young answer, or young vampire different from an old vampire. You got to figure out if they're actually young or if they're just an old vampire in a small package. So that is the initial thinking there. We do have an aspect of the Janus Mask available here as well, called the Mask of the Sun. Whenever someone chooses to mark this, each hunter narrates a dream they once had of primordial earth, back in time across the ancient seas, back in time when the spirits walked, when the sun was new, and the old gods held court. So, with all that said, we have regular scenes. I'm going to start like we did last time and just ask you all what you'd like to do. Now, here that we're in session 2, I will say that there's a few options since we're learning. You can continue the investigation of the St. James Street ghost. You can start the investigation of the Limehouse lurker. You can have what's called a vulnerable move with another hunter, whereby you and another hunter engage in one of your vices, and that lets you clear conditions. There's also a little bonus. If it's your vice, you can stumble on a clue, or you can invite the other hunter to ask you a question about the past. This is one of the other times you can talk about your past. So that is an option. Or you can take a look at your Dawn questions and maybe set up a scene that will help answer one of those Dawn questions in the affirmative. So, or combine them. You can combine all these approaches. So with all that said, Mr. Pencrier, what would you like to do today?
I think
I will also add, Mr. Pencrier, the vampire is currently in one of the bedrooms upstairs. So
I would like to hit the library, or at least hit the do the standard, almost like a Call of Cthulhu style thing, and go and look up the history of things, specifically to see if we can find out some events that took place at either 18 St. James's Street or on buildings that are no longer there, but on the same location. And I'd probably casually tell the others, like eventually when they're back, it's like, oh, we've got a bloodlust one upstairs.
Right after Jenny Johnston leaves, you're like, by the way.
How big is it?
Normal height, but
Important details.
This one's very tall, though, so it should be okay.
So that's strategy one. Another thing I would want to do later in the day, as in like thinking aloud at doing so, would potentially be to like wake, was it Julian? Was that his name? Or
Julius.
Julius, yeah.
Yes.
Wake Julius up at some point, and while he's still a little groggy from sleeping, potentially like pump him for information that we could then turn for our new threat.
Fabulous, thank you. We'll get some scenes going in a moment. Let me just check in with everyone. Mr. Roble, what do you want to do today?
I thought you were gonna say I want to wake up Julius and then let's skin him, because I'm just looking at everybody's vice and I'm like, how do we get skinning things into? Can we only engage in vices in the day phase?
No, you can do it whenever, but in order to trigger this vulnerable move, it just has to be with another hunter. You and another hunter have to be doing one of your vices. So,
but if you like, I don't know why my brain's having a hard time. But if you do it in any other context, so the vulnerable move is what clears the condition. Yeah,
that's the best way to clear conditions. Yeah.
What day of the week is it?
We never dwell on it, but I'm open to whatever you all think is fun.
I mean, we did have a night on the town last night, so and I actually do like functionally the idea that I don't know if Francis came home last night, but I feel like Liam probably did not, and so you might know. I mean, I think either you or Brand will probably know that. Given the fact that I did not come home last night, I will probably be in mass this morning if somebody wants to come try to trigger a vulnerable move with me.
Yeah,
I mean, and morning mass is every day, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, it says Sunday mass, but if we're like open to it being fine, any mass,
it's Sunday somewhere, right?
I'm open to going to mass. I think that I probably think that's like a cute thing that people do.
Why don't we do that first then? Let's have that scene.
The competition or whatever.
I'll also say, like, there are very historically parts of the church for which self-flagellation is a huge part of ecstatic devotion, and there have been a number of saints with skinning things. So, like, we could be going to like Saint Bartholomew's, which is a saint who got flayed alive also too. So I'm going to throw out there, like, there are options here.
It's less fun when you do.
Also, you do have a colleague who has a whip.
You are a buddy who has a whip. Are you also coming to mass? Are we going?
No.
Are we going to find Thop at mass?
I'm not going to the church.
Mass by putting on a show. This is what I'm hearing.
And I think for me the question would be, and not to, like, I like to stress test systems, but not to game anything. Is the concept physically together or narratively united?
The purpose is intimacy.
Okay.
So
it cannot be like solo side by side, even if it's cool narrative. It needs to be creating a moment of intimacy.
Intimacy is the key, whether that's like intimacy in every sense of the word, even just like physical proximity with no other particular emotion is fine. Cool. But yeah, so I think morning mass sounds great if you all want to go do that, or if the two of you want to do that, I think that's great.
Yeah, I'm in.
We'll have that scene in a bit. Be thinking about how you might angle to clear the conditions, because you have to sort of reasonably be able to have cleared the condition based off how the scene goes. So maybe something about it makes you feel better or makes you distracted or something like that. So, but I'm going to start with Mr. Pincryer. Mr. Pincryer, I think using Hargrave House's extensive library is a great idea. And so let's do a information move with reason. And taking a look at your conditions, I think it's just a normal roll. Go for it.
Excellent. So yeah, so very much like the way in which we're doing it would be that nicely like systematic. That is a 6 and a 2 plus nil brings a total of 8.
All right, let's take a look at our clues. And again, for anybody who might be watching this for the first time who did not watch yesterday, I have a list of clues as the keeper for each threat, and I pick the one that I think makes the most sense based off what Mr. Pincryer is doing, and I adjust it and adapt it as I need to. I think yes. The location in London, it's hard to say in the history with any precision where exactly this took place, but you can sort of triangulate probably and get pretty close to safely assuming that it's in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 1600s, there was an arranged marriage gone awry, we'll say. Awry in the sense that the young woman who was to be married did not want to be so, and hired someone to murder her betrothed. What sticks out to you, apart from the location of where this was supposed to have happened, what sticks out to you is the manner of death. It was strangulation, which is relevant based off how the ghost has behaved already in the past. But that's your clue. And the complication is quite simply this. I think reading this history, sort of remembering your encounter with the spectral force the day before, I think your neck feels a certain soreness, and I'm going to give you a sore neck condition. It's almost like a psychological thing, right? So, but otherwise, you're good. And so I think at this point, I would like to switch over to the other two characters. Liam, Francis, and a church. Since it's your vice, Mr. Thop, please just frame up the scene. What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah, I think we pan back. Let's see, given time frame to like a high Anglican service. We see kind of the even whether it's a Sunday or not is relatively unclear to anybody who is observing. But it's there is kind of an opening hymn, but we see it from kind of shot from above as we kind of pan back, and we see Liam in what is probably a disused choir loft up above, very devotedly attending, participating. It's obvious that they feel comfortable there, and there's but they are weeping, like in a way that mars the soot and dirt that stains their face, so that you can see kind of lines running down. And I think it would not be out of the stretch for at least Francis, given the I think relationship we've established there, to know that is the place that I will typically find myself, is the most kind of out of the way, distant, slightly above and detached position in the church.
Do you often weep? Like, does it seem like you are going through a unique?
You have never
moment,
you have never, I think it's even when you don't go to mass with me, or even if this was your first time, every time I come home, I have those same trails beneath my eyes.
Right. Yes.
I'd like to go deeper on that and find out, it's your vice, which means it's something that you engage in a lot, presumably to your detriment, because that's what vice sort of implies. But not necessarily. In this case, it's mostly just like an addiction, I suppose.
But I
what,
mean,
how,
I can,
why?
I can
How does it?
easily lean in. I could easily process religious trauma experiences, which I want to be sensitive to because other people experience it in ways that I don't. So if you do have religious trauma, I love you, and I'm sorry. I think here what we see is actually Liam, they're constantly kind of beset by these voices and these temptations, and mass is a place of release and relief where not necessarily in the intended way, like the rote behaviors give a sense of stability and solace, but it is a place where things are silent for a little while, but in that silence, the guilt of everything else comes into play and overwhelms them on a fully human level with no ability to be distracted by the temptation. So it is a moment of true like purgation, and honest purgation that is also unhealthy. But it is also the only place where they can experience this type of thing.
I love it. Let's just have the scene for a little bit with you and Mr. Roble.
I feel like this is probably a little shocking for me. In that, I think there would be like an uncomfortable, like, both, oh, I don't do other people's emotions, uncomfortable, right? Like I'm not actually, especially like base human emotions or what. I know you're like a weird witch. I don't know. But like being exposed to that degree of emoting, I think would be like a little awkward, because I think that I get the sense that like Roble and Thop are like developing a friendship, like some kind of like irregular, probably irregular for Roble, and it sounds like irregular for Thop, like intimate relationship that is not like not sexual or romantic.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe, I don't know. But not yet, at the very least. But and so there is like care there, which is maybe what makes it even a little bit more strange. Is like usually this would be a moment in which Robo would be like, I'm just gonna leave. You're having your moment. I'm going to exit. And so there's a lot of like willpower in like, I'm going to stay. Like I'm gonna sit here and you're gonna have your moment. I'm probably not gonna engage a lot. But just like staying put is probably the like expression of care that Robo is capable of.
I love it. This might be a great opportunity also to check in on the masterwork, which we have not seen yet from The Undeniable. So we hinted at it last time. Mr. Roble's tremendous beauty is because there is in the world a cathedral, maybe not this one, but there is a cathedral that is secretly a temple dedicated to Mr. Roble, and it receives the scars of Mr. Roble's soul. And so I'm going to make you scar your reflection, mark your little box there, Mr. Roble, because of really, truly, it's the sort of, it's the almost cavalier manner with which you allowed the cabbie to die, which is doing it. And talk to us a little bit about the cathedral, and importantly, how the cathedral is changing since last night to reflect the events of last night.
Yeah, I think so. I envision the cathedral actually being like a little bit underground, and maybe that means like not like something that was adapted by somebody else's place of worship, because it's a thing that happens all the time. So something that's really, really old that now like mimics kind of contemporary to the time cathedrals, but has these bones underneath it that were potentially pagan or something, right? And the way, so I wrote that like the way that it gets, it's a little bit subverted, or the way that it's like visually subverted to be about me, is that actually that it gets graffitied quite a bit, and not. I was picturing the intro to Rome, where it's like a lot of that like graffiti of like political commentary graffiti, that's very like simple and very old. But I think that as I do more and more that affects it, it becomes more obviously covered with things, which like covered with images created by the people who are there. Which doesn't sound like a typical degradation, but the concern for me is it being known, right? Like the fear is it being it no longer being, this is a hidden place of worship, this is a very open place of worship, not, oh, the building's actually crumbling or whatever, right? Like that is the direction it moves towards, is being more and more obvious in its actual use.
How are you specifically depicted as the object of worship in the cathedral?
Kind of. It, to an outsider, it would look rude. Like it wouldn't look like a positive. It's not in reverence, right? It's not, when we think of like typical religious imagery where there's like an icon or a figure that's being like held up. It's always as like the center point of some kind of act of extreme violence or like explicit sex. And so it's like the opposite of what we would think of, like, oh, this character is untouchable in some way. It's very like visceral. They are scenes of very like visceral, gratuitous imagery in some way, shape, or form.
A god for the people.
Yeah.
Good. Very good. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. So this nice quiet moment at Mass does trigger the vulnerable move. Let's talk about that. It says, when you have an intimate moment with another hunter while one of you is engaged in your vice, you may each clear an appropriate condition. And so taking a look at your conditions, which do we think got cleared from this scene?
I think I'm still a much better target. Like, I feel like the wax doll is less like it will take much more direct engagement for me to clear a much better target than
okay, I like that. Yeah, and we can even say that, like, you know, like the wax doll is still a thing, but like it just doesn't bother you and it doesn't like affect you like it was last night.
Secretly drop it in the holy water.
Exactly.
While we're in there.
Liam, you only have marked by Constance's head, and you don't have to clear it, but I'm curious, if you do clear it, why?
Yeah, I don't think I do. I mean, like, a big part of the conceit was I wanted to explore the move. I also knew we needed two people to do it.
It's not total loss, because you get the little bonus, right?
Right.
So the bonus says, if it's your vice, you can also stumble on a clue, in which case you tell me what the clue is, you define it, or invite Mr. Roble to ask you a question about the past, which you must answer truthfully.
Such power.
They're two great options, and I should just make up my mind quickly because we're playing live. I love both of those things. I don't particularly want to make up a clue, though I do have some fun ideas about what could easily slide in there. So I think I'll let Mr. Roble ask me something about my past.
You can think on it, Mr. Roble. I'm going to cut back over to Mr. Pincryer while you think.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Pincryer, research is going well. Your neck is throbbing psychosomatically. But what do you do next?
So there'll be a certain attempt to calm down the pain in my neck and to sort of actively relax. It doesn't feel very often that I'm actually in one place for a long time, and so I'd probably draw a very long bath. and it would probably be, yeah, like it's an empty house. There's nobody else around here at this point, so Bran is definitely wandering between the rooms, not wearing as many clothes as polite society would expect, to put it kindly. And then and taking himself a nice deep drawn out bath.
Before you get into the water,
Probably fairly loudly, and conspicuously close to where Julius was sleeping.
Very good. Okay, good. I think okay, no, that's good. I like that actually. You are being loud. You do hear Julius stirring, perhaps roused by your noise. And he says, "Oh, some of us are trying to sleep in here."
You've plenty of time to sleep. Look, I'm sorry about the thing with your neck.
Well, since I'm up, and you hear him getting up and exiting the room that he's staying in, as long as he doesn't walk around in direct sunlight, he's okay. And you can hear his boots clomping by the door. And he stops. And he says, "Are you decent?"
You'll have to wait and find out.
Good answer. And he starts to come in. He says, he walks in. Are you in the bath? You're in the bathtub, right?
I'll be in the bath, yeah. Like, there's the steam is probably cleared. The bath water's probably run a bit cold. But I'm mostly just like leaning back, soaking deep in it.
He says, just being fully submerged in water like that makes me a little nervous. It is one of the things I miss from my life before. We used to have fantastic baths where I came from. It was a big community thing, very, very big part of our culture. So I couldn't help. He sits down by the edge of the water and runs his fingers through the water. And he says, I couldn't help but overhear someone here earlier today talking about bodies stored in a basement, drained of their blood.
Yes. I assume that you've got nothing to do with the specific incident there yourself?
No, but I've heard tales of this particular little blood-sucking pipsqueak. I might be able to share with you what I know.
What's your fee?
Oh, make an offer.
And at this point, where his fingers are trailing in the water, my own fingers would come up beneath to sort of like catch him with them there. I'm like, we could remind you of certain hungers you once had.
And yet I have that one very persistent, pressing hunger. Make the information move with, I'd say presence, but it's actually sensitivity because he's a supernatural creature. So,
which is lucky because my presence is -1, whereas my sensitivity is +1.
I'm going to put you at disadvantage though because of unsteady.
Excellent. That's a 1, a 1, and a 5. So that's a total of 3.
3.
Oh no.
We shall come back to the scene. You might want to bump up with Janice Mask once you hear what's going to happen, but we'll come back to it. Have you thought of your question, Mr. Roble?
Yeah. I have This is one of those like, do I know about the dark entities? Because I was gonna ask directly about them.
Oh, I think, well, undoubtedly you've seen enough things to have a sense of that. I don't, precision we can unlock in the telling of the story. But yeah, ask the question.
I want to know a little bit about how, like, the conditions that under which they started blessing you with their presence.
So is the question more of like a how did this start? What was the first time?
Yeah.
Or is this okay. I think we kind of like cut back to as young as Liam looks, a younger version of Liam, like barely on the edge of like certainly within the realm of pre-adolescence, right? It definitely dressed in a very different light, to the point it takes a little bit longer to realize that through kind of the braids and the dress that are white and pink in front of you, that it's the same person, but they're standing in front of an alleyway, and they kind of stop and pause and tarry as like they're not in shot family keep on walking ahead, and they can just hear a whispering sound kind of calling to them out of the alleyway, and in a way that is very evidently not quite accidental. They drop like the doll that they're carrying, and it rolls kind of a little bit into the alleyway, giving them an excuse to walk in. And as they kind of walk in, and things, so like the sides of the alley kind of expand out and arc up, and we get this sense of these dark presence kind of coming in around them, and you can see kind of images dancing across their eyes up close, and we then flash to Liam's mother like grabbing their shoulder and turning them around, and we can see kind of the same not in the same way as at mass earlier, but we can see like on one eye like kind of bright glee, and on the other eye like a teardrop coming down, and like dark soot underneath the edge of that eyelid on an otherwise clean face. So yeah, from when they were like 10ish, they had a really bad experience in an alleyway that opened them up to this other spiritual world.
I love it. Let me come back over to Mr. Pencrier. You got a miss, which is a permission slip for me as the keeper to take over the scene a bit. And I think you start to be drawn into him in a way that monsters can do sometimes. You having so much familiarity with destroying them, you've probably destroyed your fair share of vampires. He's drawing you in, and you find yourself no longer in the bath. You find yourself on the sandy ground of a fighting arena. And you have a short sword and a shield, and you are battling some unseen foe while a crowd cheers rapturously. And
This is the
The
suspense. Do you like how long it took all of us? To
Yeah,
not
we
just
were
listen
like,
to
Jason's
Jason
pauses are
making the
sometimes
suspenseful
so
moment happen.
heavy that it's hard to tell.
We were like, no, I get it. We'll give you 10 minutes of just bated breath or whatever.
He said you could take over the scene a little bit. I mean, you just want to pick up right there. You know, we can switch over to Swords and Sandal real quick for a little while.
Yeah.
All right, we're getting a message over on Discord.
This is the real negative of rolling two ones.
So we are going to take Jason's power cut out, and my my face is now between two things. Hey. We are gonna take a 5-minute break right now while we see if we can get power back. Otherwise, Sean's got to GM the rest of this. That's the rules of things.
Otherwise we're running amok.
We'll be right back to continue playing The Between, or at least I hope we will be. We'll be back no matter what, but I hope we're going to keep on playing The Between, the St. James Street Ghost Part 2 here on Plus One EXP. For all of our viewers out there live right now, Jason is booting his computer back up. He had a power cut and will be back with us in just one moment, but we are still going to go ahead and take our full 5-minute break. Again, I'll drop links for The Between as well as contact information for all these amazing designers. A lot of folks are funding things right now for Zine Month, so feel free to go check out some of the great links I'm going to drop in the chat and we will be back in just one moment. And we are live here again on Plus One EXP. Jason Cordova back with us. We had a unplanned, but pretty near when we were planning to take a break. But I'm going to hand things back over to Jason, who was in the middle of, I think getting ready to psychically kill Bran was what was about to happen. No dice roll, just
we'll see.
Just keep her fiat.
Yeah. So here's the deal. As I was saying, you find yourself having this like a hallucination, sort of, where you can feel like gritty sand underneath your feet. You are in this like coliseum, like in this fighting arena with thousands of people cheering wildly as you swing your cestus and you block blows with your shield. You can't see your opponent, but they get the better of you. They trip you, you fall down, and they're on top of you, and they're holding their sword to your throat, and they look up to the viewing box, and we see Julius sitting in the viewing box with an olive branch crown and a toga, sipping wine, and he puts his hand out and thrusts his thumb downward, and your throat is slit open and the blood is flying from your throat all the way up to Julius's mouth. And then you snap out of it to realize that Julius is clamped onto your throat presently while you flail around in the bathtub, and he's draining you. What do you do, Mr. Pincrier?
I would like to invoke the Janus mask at this point, I think.
Very good. Would you like to mark the mask of the past or the future? Because this is not technically either threat.
I will go past here, I think.
So mark the first box. We can deal with it later, but instead you get a 7 to 9. And he's going to give you a clue, which is what you get for the die result. And there's a bit of a complication. And the complication is quite simply that he's going to start massaging your shoulder and neck. I think he can tell that you're having some sort of like soreness, some kind of sensation there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can replace that condition with marked by Julius. But he'll tell you. He says, the little pipsqueak vampire is very curious. We don't know much about him yet, except that he snatches Bibles. And once he snatches them, he always tears out the story of Noah and then puts the Bible back. Don't you think that's funny?
That's very, very particular. I'm probably like leaning into his massage in such a way almost to slightly shift the angle of where it's at, and almost potentially leaving additional space for him to say more, even though I'm not really expecting him to. And I'll probably then, like, at least at this, take one of his hands and like kiss him on the inside of his wrist. But then in doing so, almost like as pulling away, like my tongue will trail there at least a little bit.
Nice.
And kind of like let it go.
Very good. You got a clue though for the Limehouse Lurker. The Lurker steals Bibles and tears the story of Noah out of them.
Excellent.
Let me cut over to let me just check in with Liam and Francis. Liam, what would you like to do after this scene at the church?
I I would like to go back to the house. I would like to go back to 18 James Place, James Street.
Oh, that house. Okay, I thought Hargrave House.
Actually, I mean, I think the question is, let me actually ask the table. Do we want to move everybody to a singular spot, or does anybody have a preference?
We could try and answer. I'm very curious about answering a threat since we have a bunch of clues.
There is one thing I want to do before I theorize, though. Like, that is my only reason for wanting to go back to the house. Maybe we take the long way back to Hargrave House, past 18 James Street.
Well, Francis, are you going to go to 18 St. James's, or are you going to do something else?
Yeah, we can do a little emotional walk it off together.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, so yeah, I think walking over there is no problem, and it's a bright, lovely day. There is a police presence at 18 St. James's Street because of the events of last night, mainly the death of the cab driver. When you arrive, you will see a couple of detective inspectors and a few police constables sort of milling around out front. What do you do?
What is Francis saying to Liam at the moment where Liam drops back and takes a completely left-handed turn that you don't expect?
Oh no. I think probably something benign. I'm probably talking about a really great food dish that I haven't eaten in 150 years or something that is and then going into some vivid description, and so I step out of whatever alleyway into some kind of courtyard, and I'm saying oh, and the aromas just reminded me, and you're gone.
Right. So I'm looking for ideally an external entrance to a cellar. Secondarily, the servant entrance in the back.
I think they're basically the same. There's a sort of exterior entrance into the servants' quarters, which is down below.
Excellent.
I don't have any interest in making you sneak in, so if you want to go down there, that's fine.
That's fine. Yeah. My hope being that Francis will go to the front door and create a distraction, but not communicate it in the least.
Very good.
And so
my presence here might just do that anyway. So
I think I have to pick up with Francis first, then, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So Francis, Liam just has disappeared, and you are now there at the front. What are you doing?
Again, I am here alone. I think I probably want to keep my distance. I think I feel like I know enough to know that there is a chance that I would or we would be implicated, if we've crossed paths with the police, but we don't get along with them to begin with, and they know we're often up in their stuff, and then also I know we were here last night. I know how that guy died. I would like to stay out of sight if possible. And keep an eye out.
And yet you in particular are very, very hard to stay inconspicuous.
I know.
It is the one thing in this world you're probably not great at.
I know.
And I think that actually it's going to be one of these kinds of situations where I think it's Constance.
Of course.
My heart leapt a little bit. I was like, wait, which one is it? Constance. Is it a dramatic pause or not? Sorry.
I think Constance, I think Constance sees you, and she might vaguely recognize you from yesterday because she was spying on you when you went into their house yesterday. And she'll kind of cut across, away from the police, and she'll say, "Oh my goodness, can you believe what's going on? Weren't you here yesterday?"
What? I mean, maybe, but what is going on?
Well, I don't know exactly. I was a bit out of sorts last night, but I did hear some commotion. And, well, here we are. I mean, there was a cab driver who was found with a cake knife plunged into his neck.
The cab that was supposed to take you to the opera.
Oh no. Do you think I'm going to be implicated in his death?
Should you be implicated in his death? Who do you think did it?
Well, I hate to say, but I have always sort of invited trouble in my life. It's a curse that I've dealt with since I was a girl. But I invited a strange person into my home yesterday, and I fear there's a connection.
Oh, yeah. Do you make it a habit of inviting strange people into your home? I'd love some tea.
She says, only if they're delightful to look at.
I will do a slight twirl. Just like a small twirl. Like an understated twirl. I don't know how one understates a twirl. For me, it's understated. For her, it's probably not.
She says we should get off the street before they start asking questions.
Great. I will follow her to her house.
Indeed. Let's cut back over to Liam. We have a paint the scene here for the basement area, which contains the servants' quarters and the kitchen, in fact. This is for everyone, of course. What evidence do you see down here that shows how, historically, the servants of 18 St. James's Street have protected themselves from the ghost?
So almost all of the like major thresholds down here, essentially like the opposite from where the mantle is at the bottom of each door, where there's a big thick stone. There are quite deep carvings that have been like cut into those things, and you can still see almost like dusty covered salt down at the bottom of them. But almost all of them, there's just a habit of people just putting down lines of salt here, and in such a way that even if you like aggressively try to brush them up, you will never clear it all.
Yeah, I had a similar image. It's I think in a number of places that it's very obvious that the heads of the house would not see. There are half burnt like votives, but there's just wax stripping down the walls from them being replaced and replaced and replaced.
I was also going to say salt and candles, so I'll just sit over here and say nothing.
So, Liam, you know that there's like a small back door that kind of goes down and into this area. And, you know, kitchen's off to the side, servants' quarters, there's a few little rooms off to the other side, and then directly ahead is stairs that go up to the main floor of the house. What do you do?
I am looking for, and they're probably modernly unhealthily close to each other, where the furnace and gas lines run into the house.
I think you can find that. That's fine. That's easy enough. I don't need any rolls there. Then what?
Not in a use way, just in a narrative way. I take out a little bit of charcoal and I start to well, I draw. Actually, here's what I do. I got a little bit of charcoal and I draw some symbols on each of the pipes, and then for a use, I'll take out a tuning fork and I will reverberate them against each of the pipes. And I'm kind of schematicking where I think these go in the house, and I'm essentially, the question as a player that I'm asking is, does Liam think that this ghost has made its home in the attic or in the pipes / basement, right? Like, because in Liam's mind, it is one, with what they have seen, it is one of those two things.
I love it. You can take the information move, and if the tuning fork is part of your personal quarters, you can mark it
go ahead
to get advantage.
Is this sensitive?
Sensitivity, yeah.
Yeah, sensitivity. Then I'll get an 11.
Nice. Would you like to mark the Janus mask and bump it to a 12? Because you get a mastermind clue as well if you do that.
Oh, why? Absolutely. Why? Why not then? Let's go ahead and do that. Let's use the. I think as it makes the most sense narratively, let's use the playbook specific Janus mask, or the threat specific Janus mask.
The Unquiet, yeah. So the Mask of the Unquiet is marked. That will bump your result up to a 12. I'll remind everyone that you now all must, during either the next dusk or dawn phase, narrate a flashback to your childhood when you experienced a haunting. So, but let's pick back up with this for a brief moment. I'll give you your clue in a moment. I'm going to give you the mastermind clue first. The mastermind clue is this. You hear soft weeping coming from one of the rooms down here. And if you poke your head in to see where it's coming from, the sound goes away and you don't see anybody crying. It's just like an empty room with 2 beds. But you will see standing out in this sort of otherwise dreary gray backdrop an envelope with that's in beautiful sapphire blue paper, sapphire blue envelope with a gold stamp seal on it. Seems very out of place down here. What do you do?
I'm gonna go. Is it sealed?
It is sealed.
That's not gonna stop Liam. I'm gonna open it.
You open up the envelope, and there is a card that is also sapphire blue, and written in gold lettering, it says, "To the residents of Hargrave House, I'm so sorry I missed you." And it's signed TB. We'll come back to the clue, the other clue you find in a moment.
Okay.
I do want to pick up with Francis for just a bit. Francis, what is your intention with Constance right now? Just so I can think about the scene here.
I feel like my main, to be honest, I feel like my main intention is just to remain hidden. But I think, do I want to do this? I'm trying to see if I have a thing that I can give.
You can make her a worshiper.
Like, do I want to? I kind of want to do that. I kind of want to do that. I kind of want to give her something.
Steal her out from under Thop.
I actually think that I want to convince her, which I think I want to use her to cause a distraction so that Thop has lots of time. So if that is declaring that she is a worshiper, and then I'm going to give her the wax doll and say, go talk to the, I know the wax doll is of me, so it's going to get a little sketchy here, but like go go occupy all of the police forces or whatever. Like go make a bit of a scene.
Yeah. So by declaring her a worshiper, it means she is suddenly overtaken by your divine power. Is she becoming a worshiper right now, or has she always been one?
I think she always has been one. She just didn't know until this moment that it was me.
Ah, very good. So I think let's just have the scene for a little bit. She says, I know who you are now. Oh, I know who you are now, my lord. I've been waiting for so long. I thought it might be you yesterday, but now here to have you in the flesh. And per the move, you have to say how she debases herself in front of you.
I feel like Constance's head is classic and old school. So I feel like it is I feel like it's a pretty classic, like fall to the knees, like head to the ground moment.
So she's prostrate in front of you and probably going on at some length. And you can eventually stop her, I suppose.
This is apparently the happiest Constance head that has ever existed in the Between.
Yeah, also, like, I mean, internal character monologue. This now means that I am attached to her surviving also. Like Francis is attached to her as a worshiper. Yeah, at some point I'll like let her go for a moment because I enjoy the attention. And then we'll just I need you to do something for me.
She says, say it, whatever. I shall do it for you.
Just go cause a scene next door. Just occupy, ask them a bunch of questions. If you find anything useful, that's great. But if not, that's also fine. And then
she will do this, and she will do her job almost too well. She goes out and she begins like wailing, like just wailing and like and flailing around, yelling, just acting very, very deranged. And it will get the police and the detective inspectors they're all like kind of tending to her, giving you a free clear reign of the house as you wish. So what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to take this opportunity to go inside because I'm assuming that that's where Liam has gone. Like, I think it's a fair assumption for me to be like, Liam probably found some other route in there. And while they're all over here, I'm just going to like sashay my way in the front door.
Very good. Very good. Mr. Pencrier, I think after you're done with your bath, Julius says, well, I'm feeling very, a little exhausted. I'm not normally awake right now. I'm going to go back to my room, his room. I'm going to go back to my room and continue my nap. But this was a most enjoyable afternoon.
Thank you for letting me on the things that you remember.
There might be some people stopping by later on tonight. I hope that's okay.
Well, as long as you don't cause a scene, I suppose that could be all right.
Wonderful. I do miss this place. And he goes back to the room nonchalantly. What do you do after that?
After that, I'd probably head down to the drawing room and start working on some like scratching out again on paper, just some like active thoughts as to what might be going on with the ghost.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to that. Let me give a clue to Liam. So, Liam, you were kind of like looking at these gas lines to try to see if there's a connection to the ghost, either spectrally, physically, something else. And your clue is this. I think there's a clue that at first I think you don't really pay it any mind, which is that there is etched on the pipes at various intervals very, very fine spiral patterns. An unusual thing, it could just be a flaw of the workmanship or something, who knows. But then you see a mirror and it starts to crack in that same spiral pattern. And then there's a glass cloche over a little plant and it starts to crack with this fine spiral pattern on the glass. That's your clue. And at this point, Francis, you can come into the house. So, Francis, what are you going to do?
I think
it seems like the Beals aren't here, by the way, because of all the drama, they went out for the day or something. So.
Yeah, I feel like I would like it if when I walk in, I like just hear the reverberations in the pipe, like from the pipe tuning, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And we'll like head, which in my mind makes a nice little cinematic moment where I walk into like semi chimes just coming in the door after me. They're just kind of gassy chimes. And we'll head downstairs to make sure that Pop is okay. But if they're not here, then the baby's not here, and I'm still kind of convinced that the ghost just wants the baby. But yeah, we'll join them downstairs. If I can like reverse echolocate them through the pipes.
I don't think it'd be too much trouble. You knew that. Well, you probably made a fairly educated guess that Liam went around back. So
I find them in basements more often than not. Like, oh, if I don't know where they are, they're probably in the basement.
Basement dweller. Yeah. So I think you might pass by the kitchen, and it sounds like Irma Thicket, the cook, is in, even if the rest of the family is not, because you can hear a steady chop, 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 chop of meat or vegetables or something being chopped up. What do you do?
They replaced that big kitchen knife really fast. I think I'm going to shuffle by and try and not be seen, because in my mind I hear the chopping, and what I envision is that she is going to turn and huck that kitchen knife at me the second I am witnessed. And so would like to, whether or not that is an accurate precognition, like I would like to, I have a precog moment, I'm like, oh no, and then would like to just
keep going. You can, that's fine. So we can put the two of you together then.
Hello.
Yeah, I think you come down as I'm like finishing up this process and putting the tuning fork, which I even like the idea that these spirals have like warped it a little bit, like it's got some of that same vibe on it now, and so I put it away in my pocket.
Yeah, I think maybe even the sound has like almost like a repeating looping
resonance
sound. Yeah.
You said, I don't know if you told us this last night, but we all we assumed that when we reconvened, we kind of all shared our experiences from the prior day. And you said that the cook has been here a really long time, right?
That's what Constance said. Yeah, longer than the previous owners.
She's upstairs. I don't know if she knows anything. we could try and see. Do you feel like you have a?
I mean, we can always ask. You might be better at asking than I am. But I would suggest that maybe asking her when the last time this happened was.
Oh yeah. I feel like I walked down the stairs. When I arrived, I have this like look in my eyes that is like, stop leaving me in alleyways, like, you little shit. Just why is this always a thing we're doing? I found you again, finally. Yeah. Should we have a chat? I think we should have a chat.
After you.
No, I insist.
And I'll go up first.
Well, and to be clear, the kitchen's also in the basement. It's just like
I go over
on the other
first.
end. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yes, that makes sense.
As yesterday, you smell her before you see her. She has a very strong onion and tobacco smell. She's a very square-framed woman, and she's chopping, and do you just walk right up to her, Francis?
Yeah, I think I will clear my throat as I enter the room.
She looks up and she says, well, by the look of you, you're not from Scotland Yard.
Very far from it.
You look a little too delicate for that kind of work, I think.
Excuse you. You have been here for a while, yes?
Yes. I've worked for the last 3 families that lived in this house. Chop, 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 chop.
At any moment. Every time there's like a chop, I have a small flashback of the kitchen knife just flying through the air. Like potentially having a little bit of a like, I'm having a hard time staying focused on the conversation because there's just like a chop and I have a flashback of the chop. Has this all happened before?
She looks up at you and she says, I suppose you're here asking about ghosts, huh?
Yes. Unless there's something else we should be asking about. Ghosts and unhappy families, I guess.
I don't know anything about no ghosts. Now, if you'll excuse me, the butcher's boy is going to be around soon, and Mrs. Beale has a mind for mutton tonight. Chop, 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 chop. You'll notice, Liam, as she's chopping, chop, 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 she's going to town on some kind of long root vegetable, and she's getting closer and closer and closer to her fingertips with no seeming concern. She is within a few chops of going right over them. Liam, what do you do?
Time, ma'am.
Wait, what'd you say? Say that again.
Time, ma'am. You should add. I mean, like a little bit of time. I think.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I've been a cook for over 35 years. I don't need any sort of advice from the likes of a pretty young thing like you. Chop, chop, chop.
Well, I couldn't help but notice that you had some. I didn't know if you were ready to add it now.
Yes, perhaps I am. And she's like, thank you for the reminder. She goes for the herbs and begins chop, 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 chopping.
Is she going right back at her hand again?
Seems to be getting pretty close. Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, you said you've worked here for 3 families?
I think I like the day move because of this scene for keeping your nerve. Let's have it from Liam. Liam, what are you afraid is going to happen if you lose your nerve right now, or if you lose your composure? I suppose. I
am worried that there is something dark afflicting this woman. And I am worried that if she, I think for Liam specifically, the concern would be if she spills her blood, it will only give it power.
Oh, very interesting. Roll with composure for now.
Composure for now. I like that.
Oh no.
2.
She's like, now, if we're quite done, chop, 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 chop. I have plenty of work to get to. Chop, 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 chop. And I don't need to be bothered by the likes of you. Chop, 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 chop.
I am gonna.
There are no ghosts.
I'm gonna
Chop.
Oh.
Right through her wrist. She just slides her hand right underneath. She lifts up a bloody, spurting stump. I would like for you both to make day move. What are you afraid is going to happen right now if you lose your nerve?
I'm gonna be framed for murder again. No, I probably have a more deep fear.
So I have rights of salt and smoke. I also took that what powers it is blood sacrifice, and there's a
Great big one
lot,
here. Yeah,
lot of blood happening right now.
Yeah.
I am worried that if I am worried that that I'm and I think I can actually feel this regardless of how well I roll. I can feel myself being drawn in to try to use that blood to fix this or address the immediate problem.
I'll add here that if you do want to use the Janus mask to avoid that outcome, you can do so now, but otherwise we'll press forward.
I think I'm going for it.
Very good. Roll with go ahead and roll sensitivity, Liam, just to see what your result is. See if you hold it together.
That is an 8.
All right, good. We'll come back to that. And what are you afraid is going to happen, Francis?
I think I'm afraid for Liam here. Like my fear, I don't have a lot of fear around the ghost, but I think probably I am worried that another dark entity having access to somebody who is like struggling with that boundary already will put them at like a much greater risk than anything that was going to happen to me. I don't know if I can implicate a problem on a different player character with my fear. That feels rude, but here we are.
No, I love it. I think it's great. Roll with sensitivity.
Do I even have sensitivity? No. Great. Oh, it's a good solid 5.
Yeah. I think that I'm going to kind of wrap up both the complication and your missed roll and say that for whatever reason, maybe it's the dark powers telling you, Liam, the sacrifice of Irma Thicket is going to be required to clear the ghost from this space. And I think you know this because she's being very, very nonplussed about the fact that she cut off her own hand just now. She says, would you look at me, so clumsy? And she takes her spurting stump of a hand and begins wrapping it with bandages. And she says, if you don't mind, I have lots of work to do. And that will end the day phase. We shall end it right there. So.
Great.
All the good stuff. Let's talk about the dusk. If you want to go ahead and start answering a question, this is a great time to do it. So you're all back at Hargrave House. We can have this conversation now if you want. And the best way to kick it off is I imagine the question you're going after is how can we get the ghost to move on to the next world? And you have 8 clues. If the best way to kick it off is if somebody has a theory about what they think is the way to do it.
I kind of assume the chef is the mistress, but I don't know why you guys are.
Go ahead. Sean, were you about to say something?
No, I'm. Well, I've got some thoughts, but I was going to wait to build in yours.
Yeah, I feel like I actually don't know that I feel like she is the. I don't think she is it, but I do think that she is essentially the anchor for it, and I do like her as. Like, so the vibe I'm getting, like the from the general clues, which I know that they're not meant to be prescriptive, just descriptive. I love the idea of like a jilted lover, a murder that happens. I even like the idea of there being kind of a tryst that where there's three people and it may be somewhat cross class. And that it is now become a repeating process through the haunting, right? Like that has become something that plays out in this household over and over and over again. And whether, I'm forgetting her name, whether Irma, whether the
Irma
cook,
Thicket.
whether the cook is the initial person for whom this was attached or the next most willing recipient of being a human acre, I do agree with that. If we're crossing character player boundaries, obviously as a player, I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Why don't we? I think that's a great start. Why don't we review the clues we have for ourselves and also for people watching the stream? So we have 8 clues currently. One of them, the first is that a room appeared on fire at 18 St. James's Street, but then was not. It just suddenly was not on fire. A book about a woman who murdered her philandering husband keeps falling off a shelf. There's a story about a decanter that empties itself and fills back up on its own. Mr. Pencrier's hip flask was filled with blood, and that was a gruesome scene. We know a general sort of thing about ghosts, which is emotional trauma is what makes them stick around in this world. We have a stack of love letters from the 1700s. We have an incident in the 1600s in which an arranged marriage went awry when the bride hired someone to strangle the groom to death. And it was in the proximity of 18 St. James's Street. And then we have that strange spiral pattern. So these all seem like there are some connections between them naturally, I think. There's a lot of like things that are very different from one another. One thing that I'll tell you is as you're going through this process is you are free to add any extra context you think would be interesting. And also anything that we know and have learned so far is relevant to the discussion, even if it's not a capital C clue, right? So you don't have to work them all in, but the more you do, the better your die roll will be. So.
It's my thought in general that something went wrong, which then would have caused the next thing to stick around. So it's very likely to be grief, like a significant amount of grief, and probably whatever the entity is that has become the ghost would have done so after having heard about something that had happened maybe 100 years or so before, where somebody got out of an arranged marriage by having the groom strangled. And so the person who is now the ghost almost tried this again, just potentially even via a different, like, I mean, there's so much blood that's kind of like filling and defilling. So perhaps even attempted it in a separate way, and it just, that itself then was really ineffective. Probably even to a point where the person who had called for it maybe and then like had significant regret in doing so. At least I think.
Like, do we have a sense of like do we have a general sense that the spirit is like hungry, for lack of a better term? Like, are these murders resolving something for it? Is it playing out the same scene over and over again because it's stuck, or is it
I don't
more
know.
malevolent and preying on?
It feels
the
malevolent.
household?
I
Yeah.
mean, it's been very, very hostile.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
and
outwardly
there's
attacking you,
protective
murdering
hostile,
the cabbie.
yeah, but like that. And so like
I left it a little vague whether that was what was actually possessing Constance or not. That could have just been your own personal demons that did that. But
oh yeah, I didn't take that as particularly. I didn't take it as necessarily disconnected, but not necessarily connected either.
yeah, I took it as like just the power of this location caused your dark entities to get a wild idea.
No, yeah, I think for me the question is like, are we looking at a pattern of trauma that a ghost is stuck in and causing people around it to repeat? Or are we looking at active, hungry, predatory malevolence by the ghost? Like, and I don't know if people have vibes on that or not, one way or the other.
I kind of like active malevolence a little bit more. It's like like there's part of me with the spirals. I feel like there's part of me that kind of likes the idea that like potentially somebody has a cheating husband or whatever, a cheating partner of some variety more contemporarily, and has like read about, like engorged themselves in things that were kind of comforting of those stories. That way that like when you're going through something traumatic, you like look for the movie that has the same story, and that's like where the letters and the book come from. And maybe summoned said ghost through that.
Yeah, that's what it invites it in. And the thing is like, cool, I can kill again now.
That's pretty good. So it's a malevolent ghost that was brought here by someone in the house. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Do we? I mean, I do like the idea of also making me as a player feel way less bad about potentially killing them later. Do we feel like? I mean, I love the idea of potentially like Irma in love with a member of the household, reciprocated or not. Either way, I don't have a strong preference.
Like way back in the day, right?
Yeah, way back in numerous families ago, and depending on Irma's actual scenario, like maybe even older than we think, but bringing the ghost here and now working with them to play this out, like this revenge out on up and coming social climbers. Like she didn't get married, like she got picked over because the person was socially like trying to socially climb.
Yeah,
I think that's fantastic. Maybe if everyone likes that sort of basic idea, why don't we start working through the clues a little bit? So going with sort of Max's idea about Irma's almost like indulging in these kinds of stories, and that's what invites the ghost, I think that definitely accounts for the love letters. It accounts for just the general history of the place, the arranged marriage gone awry.
Does it compare the book?
Definitely the book, right?
I had not shifted it over so everybody could see. There we go. That's what we're going through right now.
Okay, yeah, definitely the book, definitely the love letters, definitely the arranged marriage gone awry, and certainly just the general concept of the emotional trauma drawing the ghost. I think that's easy to check. That's 4 clues that are pretty well accounted for. What about the others?
If we like the idea that the ghost is like that, essentially there is this level of malevolence in which there's this kind of push back and forth between Irma, who brought the ghost here, and the ghost who is hungry and looking for this. I think we can add in a lot of the other cyclical things to it, right? Like specifically decanter empties and fills on its own. The hip flask with too much blood in it, and maybe the spiral cracks on the pipe and mirrors.
Yeah, the spiral cracks for the sort of like repeating
Yeah.
The repetition. Same thing with the decanter. I'm not as convinced about the hip flask with blood. I think that's probably something different.
That's fine.
But the other two for sure. Also because if we kind of imagine that you were all sort of suggesting that this is someone who spurned Irma because they wanted to climb the ladder, which implies that maybe they were a servant also.
Oh.
And right.
The
So
other thing
that's
it
the
could be-
decanter, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah, but also like hip flasks are very much like that's a symbol of social class. Like
right, yeah, exactly.
you can
Right.
be walking
yeah.
around, so it's not even so much the blood. We're focusing on the blood. It's not the blood. It's
actual flask.
the focal point is the fact that it's like, hi, I'm a rich person. I've got one of these objects.
Right. I think that's very good.
Yeah, I think for me it was more the drinking deep of like carnality from that symbol. Though, I mean, we also cannot check it because theoretically there is another question we can ask if we don't. Like if we were playing long term,
that is true. If we were playing long term, you could like leave. You could leave
that
some
so we could
questions,
answer
leave
the
some
other
for future.
question. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like it. I mean, I think the way I think the decanter, the hip flask, I think the way you both explained those things works out really, really great. I mean, if you want to just go for it, what about the room on fire? Maybe that's the one you'd leave for the other question because it relates to a specific room. I don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome. Max, any other thoughts?
No, I'm into this. I was gonna like if we really want the room on fire, I feel like it. I was thinking that would have just been the like way that the original person died, and possibly like the reason and or somebody else died in that fire, and that's why there's so much guilt and regret about it. It wasn't even like the object; it was like, oh, somebody else died.
Like Irma set him on fire. Yeah, who knows? I think if we were playing long term, a group would probably leave one or two of these clues for the other question, right? Yeah. But I do like that, Max. I think that's where my mind went. I was thinking that like whoever, assuming it was a boy, whoever this boy was that Irma was in love with, burned up in the fire, right? Yeah. But okay, but that's still pretty good. You've got 1, 2, 3, 7 of your 8 clues. So that would be a +1 on the die roll. But let's just review the clues really quickly so everyone knows kind of the answer here. So ultimately what we're saying is the answer to the question is you have to basically stop Irma's cycle of hatred, essentially hatred and like anger, right? In order to get the ghost to go away, because it was a malevolent thing that was drawn to her anger, to her trauma. The hip flask represents social class. The decanter represents the fact that the boy was a servant just like her. The book, the love letters, and the story about the arranged marriage going awry are all just love gone awry, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have the spiral pattern representing the pattern, representing the cycle, representing the repeating nature of it. I love this. I think this is really good. I think this is a really, really good theory. And so if you're correct about this, then you will have the opportunity to get rid of the ghost. But let's see if you're correct. So Tony, why don't you do the honors and roll +1?
If you roll a 2 again.
Oh no. One ran off.
No.
One decided to run off the table.
Oh.
my big clunky dice comes out for a minute. So that is a 10 on the dice.
Nice.
+1.
+1 is an 11. There is a 12+ result on the answer a question, which is if you get a 12+, Theodora, the mastermind, will be present during the resolution of the threat. If you would like for that to happen, you can all mark Janus Mask to make it happen. But otherwise, you could leave it at 11.
I mean, it's a one shot, so I do like big flavor. And so, y'all down to mark some Janus Masks?
Sure. Yes.
All right, mark some Janus Mask. Everybody mark past or future as you wish. And I think we should take a break here. So when we get back, we'll continue with the dusk phase and all the things we have to do during the dusk phase. One of the things that we'll do during the dusk phase is you have the option of doing your Janus Mask narrations or whatever is required of you. You can wait till the dawn if you wish, but you can also do it during the dusk. You all have the ones that you've marked on your page, plus you all have to narrate a haunting from your childhood. So a fair amount of things to do. So be thinking on that. Let's take a 5-minute break.
So we're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back and play some more of The Between. We are currently exploring the threat of the St. James Place Ghost, as well as a little bit of the Limehouse Lurker. If you have more curiosity about this game or the people who are playing it, I'm going to drop some links in the chat on Twitch while we are off stream. Also, anime thoughts, shoot me that question over at +1EXP on Twitter or over on Discord, and I'll get you the link that you're asking about. It's not pertinent to our stream, but I do have it, so I can get it for you. And we will be back in about 5 minutes. We are back here on Plus One EXP, answering questions and probably getting rid of Ghost. Hopefully getting rid of Ghost. We'll find out. We answered the question really well. We'll see what happens next. I'm going to hand things back over to Jason Cordova to take us back into play.
Fabulous. Thank you. So I do want to just sort of check in with the move since we didn't really do that. So the move says, once you have this discussion, you roll and you add the number of clues, subtract the number of complexity to get your result. On a 10 plus, it's correct and the opportunity can be pursued. So you are now able to send this ghost on its way via a quieting ritual. This particular quieting ritual must involve the death of Irma Thicket. So that's one thing. Now, if you had gotten a 7 to 9, it would be like a hard resolution. Like the ghost would fight you really hard the whole time. But since you got a 10, you have the advantage. Like you'll be able to dispatch it pretty well. You got a 12 plus, however, as well. And the 12 plus means that while you're pursuing the opportunity, the mastermind will reveal themselves. So we are in the dusk phase after a very eventful day phase. And the first thing we have to do is talk about Hargrave House. So last time we talked about the trophy room. And I think let's just have a little echo of St. James's Street and do the servants' quarters. Now, the servants' quarters in Hargrave House are mostly empty because very few people want to actually work at Hargrave House. And so they're mostly unused. However, they have most frequently been used as a place for trysts between the house's residents, either you all or previous residents. What evidence of these little nighttime encounters in the servants' quarters between the residents of Hargrave House do we see?
So, in my mind, before we started playing, I was like, what part of the house does, and I had zero idea about the dusk mechanic for this actually at that point in time. I like to imagine that Liam does have an actual room, but like as we come into the servants' quarters, Liam is like knocking a whole bunch of stuff into like a bag. And it's like, oh, how did all this get here? Very much so. Signifying potentially tryst galore, or at least that this is where I am most comfortable in the house, actually.
Is Liam a voyeur or an active participant? Yeah, I think that I like the idea that there are a variety of ephemera of different people's tastes. Like there's something cute and romantic in one corner and something a little bit of a darker taste spectrum in another corner, and there's they kind of intermingle every once in a while. So they'll be a cute flower or something and some kind of book of poetry, and then some kind of device that probably didn't have uses, was not designed to be used in the bedroom or something.
And beneath the stove, there's something almost at first glance looks like it just could be a discarded sausage skin, but functionally it's the same material, but it has been knotted off and is essentially a discarded condom. It's just stuck under there.
You all need a housekeeper so bad. You need a factotum. That's what you need. Good. Thank you. All right, let's continue with the dusk phase. Now, everyone gets to say what they're going to do tonight. It doesn't mean you're going to get to, but I'd like to hear it. I'd like to hear your desires nonetheless. Mr. Pincryer.
I hope that this evening we can put the ghost to rest, especially if the family were out for the day and haven't returned later. There's a possible chance that they're out for a couple of days in total. There's no time like the present in general, but also now is a golden opportunity to do the deed.
Indeed. Ms. Thop?
I I love that. I also think for Liam, even though they assume that is their plan also, they are assuming that there is a good chance that they will have to probably kill Irma tonight. But I think for me, I am actually looking for Bran to call the shots on this. Like, I think we kind of established last time that two of us are F around and one of us is find out. And this is the moment at which the find out matters tremendously more than the F around. And so the same, but I think within that context, it is specifically, I plan on doing whatever Bran tells me to do within my area of expertise.
Yeah, I also am here for a ghost hunt. I feel like I am prepared. I am ready. I would like it to not like me so much. I would like to be free from. I feel like I probably have been like checking my shoulder quite a bit, especially since the interaction with the cook, and also would like to go hunt one. But yes, this is your area of expertise, so like, I won't cut in too much. I won't backseat drive the ghost hunt too much.
Fair enough. So, you all have marked Janus Mask, and everyone has to also do the Mask of the Unquiet as well. You can do any combination of those that you wish right now, or you can wait until the dawn phase. But if anybody would like to go now, read your prompt and do it.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a couple of them now. The first order is the haunting, specifically in that when Bran was young, and typically there were quite a few times where like wilderness survival was being trained, and constantly there was one particular event where I was sure that there was a stone in my shoe, and I was constantly complaining to my uncle about this, who was functionally telling me to get over it. And at night, eventually, after like taking off my hiking boot and like rubbing off down my feet, there wasn't a stone there, but the cracked leather in the inside of the boot itself just showed like a horrid little grin. And typically that has then like vanished and reappeared in different places throughout the entirety of the rest of that weekend. The second one is the one that came about from the first, from my first marking of the Janus Mask, which is a narrative flashback to my childhood, that showed the first hunt I went on and what about it was that disturbed me. And with that, it was kind of hunting a fairly strange, like very strange beast that almost essentially was had the head of a lion and some legs, and functionally that was the entirety of it. And as it was a sort of like a predator, a sort of creature that hunted, we set up a trap, and the trap was that one of our servants was killed and put in a stream of running water to attract this beast. And I was told beforehand exactly what it was that was going on, but it wasn't until I was there that I saw that whilst the servant would be killed as part of the process, she wasn't dead. Like, the veins on her arms and her arteries had been opened up so that it would mingle with the water. And I'd kind of almost like accepted that, okay, there's a corpse here and we have made the corpse, but not to actually watch her die in front of me.
It's intense. I love it. Would anybody else like to do Janus Mask?
Go ahead.
Good.
No, go and do yours first, because I've got mine. Mine is I like mine, but I want to hear what you've got first.
Oh, the one that I just took. So I'll do my hunting later, or at least like after Tony speaks, but maybe in the next phase. But the most recent one that I took is the Gilded Door, and so I take the condition Most Beloved.
Very good.
and the rest of you cannot take. Is this one that's on other playbooks, or is it? Yeah. So the rest of you cannot take the Gilded Door because I have taken it.
Yes. So this is worth talking about, even though we're not continuing after today necessarily. I do want to say that this is a really key part of the game, the Gilded Door. Whichever hunter takes it first, and in some cases, like if the factotum, when they take it, they actually give it to the employer. But whoever gets most beloved, that condition can never be removed. It's permanent. And most interestingly, it actually changes how the monsters, the threats, treat you. And so the threats all have direction for, like, sometimes they say, like, if the most beloved, do this to the most beloved, or they treat the most beloved this way. Or sometimes different characters within the threats, named characters, treat the most beloved differently. So choosing the most beloved is it's an invitation to have the world be particularly interested in you for ill or better, usually for ill. So
I realize that might not have a lot of implication because we are nearing the end, but I read it and I was like, this feels correct.
Oh, it's good. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we get to talk about it at least. And so, for example, in one of the as an example, in one of the threats, Figs Pigs, which is about a family of cannibal pie makers, you all are turned on to this mystery because the most beloved is sent one of their famous Figs Pigs pies, and the most beloved player has to describe how they realize that the pie has human meat in it. And so it's that sort of thing, right? So yeah, your life would be very, very interesting indeed in future sessions, because you're like super most beloved because you're the undeniable and the most beloved. So very good. Yeah.
I chose narrate a flashback to a time when you were in your mother's womb that shows even then you dark entities were interested in you, but I'm going to do that one second. We see actually Liam in what very much appears to be a teenage presentation now, much closer to where they currently look like. Definitely post-adolescence from height and frame shifting, but now in kind of that, in a very, very ambiguous form of dress. Hair still a little bit longer than it is at the moment. Sitting in a graveyard near dusk. And dark spirits actually can be seen in kind of in the periphery. We get that same kind of hinting of shadows moving on the edge of this. And Liam is staring down at a grave at this moment and is getting ready to turn and look at one of these dark spirits to ask a question when all of a sudden a hand alights on Liam's shoulder and turns them back, and it's their mother again. Turning them away. But I think as we cut back and away, we also get a shot of the mother's grave in full view. And I want to ask this question, if it's okay with Max. Max, what is a symbol your devotee would have marked on their grave?
Oh, okay. I think there's like a really, I'm going to be slightly comedic, but I think there is it's a very simple little like circle with an X in it. And every once in a while you get almost like something could be marked for death. And then every once in a while you get X's on either side and somebody's marked for something else.
Oh, interesting. So I think we see that the symbol on the grave, as we look at the other Janus mask, we see that same alleyway. And it's an alleyway that could be anywhere, or maybe it is just a similar alleyway. And we see my mother, very pregnant, me in the womb, standing in front of this alleyway as there's kind of a whispering. And she steps into it as these dark figures start to swirl around. But she kind of walks through the middle of it. And wherever in the world, and perhaps potentially multiple places in the world, as she walks to the end of that alleyway, I think it opens up to the cathedral that is Francis's.
Very nice indeed. Good.
If that's okay. If those things are okay. Okay.
I'm into it.
Let's do the next part of the desk phase, which is to introduce the unseen. I'll remind you for edification's purposes, the unseen is a scene that takes place at the same time as the events that you're all experiencing during the night phase. It's just something happening somewhere else in the city. It has no direct connection to the story. The purpose is to create thematic or sensory connections between the two scenes. And it can be vice versa. Like to get an echo in the night, you can sort of like connect up to someone else's unseen prompt. You can connect up your unseen prompt to someone else's hunt scene. Like as long as it kind of bounces between the two, I think you're okay. And which unseen are we going to do tonight? There are a couple I could go with that are very thematic based off what we're doing and the things we've been doing. I think probably the most thematic would be the attic at Gransby House, because it's about the maids of a well-to-do house. But I think instead we're going to go with sorry, it's not riveting television, but I think we're going to go instead with the Cult of the Pig. This is the second row from the bottom, second one over. I'll highlight it for you. The first prompt is for, actually, let me read it first. A secretive cult dedicated to the pagan swine god Mock has gathered in a fashionable salon on this holy night to make offerings to their pig deity. The paint the scene prompt is the first one, and that's for everyone, so everyone will do that. Second prompt will be for Sean. Third will be for Max. And the fourth will be for Tony. And with all that said, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back into the night phase.
Awesome. We're going to take just a short little break while we take a look at these, and we'll be right back. We're back here live on Plus One EXP doing the unseen of The Between, which is a phenomenal game that we're playing with Jason Cordova, the designer. And you can go check out if you go to ttrpg.link /betweengame, which is right down there at the bottom of the screen also too, and in the descriptions if you're watching this later. Jason, go to walk us through this?
Let's start our night phase. The Cult of the Pig. Everyone, how has this otherwise sumptuously decorated salon been changed to make it a ritual space dedicated to an ancient pagan pig god?
There have been a number of large vats of mud that have been brought in and placed in the middle of the room.
There's also a number of like quite like a darkish red, although it's kind of going a little bit brownish now. Just like imprints on the wall, which is like round and with a couple of holes in it. It looks exactly like somebody has like taken a pig's nose, dipped it in something, and then just kind of got a plunk, plunk. And actually, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I think you can tell that that's exactly what they did because those pig noses are still attached to pig heads that they've like strewn, like hung around the side of the wall, but all of the noses are still red, whether or not it's probably blood. Maybe it's blood, maybe it's not, but it's probably blood.
So, Hargrave House, you're all preparing to go deal with the St. James's Street ghost. A question for Mr. Crier. I know we assume everything is shared, but I do want to actually ask, have you told the others about Julius sleeping in one of the rooms?
Yes. But only at very incredibly basic level, in the sense of explaining what is happening. And that's it. Yes, there is. Julius is upstairs.
You're all getting ready to go out when you hear ding, 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 ding at the door.
I'll answer the door.
I was going to say, I don't answer doors. There's no world.
Just open them.
At the door, there is a woman. By her state of dress and ungentle nature, you can assume is probably a sex worker. She has a kind of a pile of red hair and showing quite a lot of cleavage. And her dress looks like it was probably very nice 10 years ago. She says, I was told to be here tonight, but oh my goodness, look at the state of this place. Why would anyone want to be here? Oh, it's like the horror show, like something from the Grand Guignol.
Yes, I imagine. Perhaps, though you certainly aren't mistaken, you don't want to be here.
And at this point, you'll hear Julius at the top of the stairs. Oh, she's here for me.
Oh, I know.
He's like, come in, dear, come in. And she curtsies at you.
I'm though the least physically imposing of all of us.
Yeah.
To the nth degree, I am as posted as I can be, so that as she passes me, I can say, "This is probably your last chance."
And she's like, she looks at you and she just kind of smiles. And Julius says, "Don't worry about them." And with that said, you all can get ready to go out now. How are you all dressed for ghost hunting, Mr. Pincrier?
I am essentially like mostly wearing overalls, almost like kind of dock workers sort of clothes.
Almost as if we weren't afraid of no ghosts.
Almost the same sort of color, but a slightly rougher, almost like hempen sort of version of things. But like if we were to like focus on, like if the camera was to focus on exactly what Bran was doing for a moment, he's got like quite large salt crystals, sort of like grinding up in a pestle and mortar, that had been made, like taken from Thames water that's then been distilled down, and the salt has been kind of like taken out from that, and just like grinding it to a fine powder.
Do you want to take that out of my cupboard?
Ooh, yes, if it means it's better for us.
It is, and it does mean it is better for it.
And potentially this could even be the thing where, like, I'm explaining to Liam why this salt is better than anything else, which is just that this is a London ghost. We are using London salt against it.
No foreign
ding,
salt is going to come
ding,
in here and take.
Ding, 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 ding.
I'm at the door again.
There is a young man at the door, and he looks, I would say, wayfish. That's how we'll describe him. And he's chewing tobacco and spits it on the doorstep and says, "I'm looking for Julius. Is this where Julius is?"
I guess he is quite hungry. I'll tell you what I told the last one, and that is that
Julius says, "Oh, in here. Come in here, lad. We're going to set up in the sitting room. Is that all right?" And he goes in.
Same caution as they go past.
Mr. Roble, how are you dressed for ghost hunting?
The same as I'm always dressed. Except I think this time there is a the jacket is actually like fastened, and there's a little like pocket chain that ends in a small like cross charm that I've pulled out. And definitely before we leave, which may not be right this very second, but I'm going to lean into the sitting room and just say, "Don't get blood on the carpet," before exiting.
Ding, 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 ding.
Hello. They're in the sitting room, but like I don't even know who they are yet. I'm just saying it as I open the door, but it's probably go on.
It's a pair of twins, a pair of young women, and they look at you and they say in unison, "Thank you," and then they continue on to the sitting room. How are you dressed for ghost hunting, Liam?
Liam owns exactly one outfit. And so Liam is always the same way. What Liam does have is the ability to secret more stuff about themselves. So we see what might commonly be referred to at Hargrave House as bunchy Liam, where I've just got a bunch of stuff in my pockets.
Ding, 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 ding. At the front door.
Oh dear. How long is he going to be here? I say to Bran as I go to the door.
Well, he should be leaving by the end of this evening. That's what I said.
At the door, is a woman. She is an older woman, an older black woman, but very beautiful for her age. She has her hair done up magnificently. She's wearing a very, very rich, deep blue gown, and she has on her throat a glimmering sapphire. And she says, "My name is Theodore Brathwaite, and I think you all could use a ride." Let's cut back over to the cult of the pig. Sean, Mock demands a sacrifice of riches. What does the cult offer him? Describe the manner of the offering.
So riches in this sense is very much a wider sense in terms of all that might be richness. And particularly in this case, all that might be like fatty or kind of like strength from that. And every single member of the cult, many of whom have got what, like at a casual glance might just look like stretch marks or something, but have taken long gouges of flesh out of their stomach fat. So they've got like long, almost like twisting like rope style things that can kind of been used, and they're all kind of like thrown together in the same sensor, which is then burned down to a sort of tallow that can then be used to actually light the flame for the rest of the night.
Fantastic. Three of you are in Theodore Brathwaite's magnificent carriage on your way to 18 St. James's Street. The seats are... No, let's paint the scene. How do we know, just from being inside the carriage, Theodore Brathwaite has more money than she knows what to do with?
I think both Thop and Pincrier have never seen this kind of wood before. I have. But this is but it is something I probably haven't seen for a very long time. But it's not like, oh yeah, mahogany is when people are fancy, but this is like an unidentified, like, I don't know, good enough, wood's good enough, but like my brain's like some kind of cool ash. I feel like ash wood is what
Can we say it's repurposed like wood from a ship? That'd be kind of fun.
Oh yeah, great. Wonderful.
This is where the ship of Theseus ended up.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. So Theodore Brathwaite can go roaming around London terrorizing people. Good. Tony, Sean?
It is contrary to any form of reasonable logic, entirely and eerily smooth to ride in. There is not a shock mechanism that exists even today that rivals the steadiness of these streets over London cobblestones.
In the very, very center of the very center of the carriage, there's almost like a small table where you'd have certain things chilled, and like often you might have like a bowl of ice with some grapes on it or something. And in this one, this vast bowl is just full of caviar.
Love it. I had a chance to meet Mr. Pincrier yesterday, though I fear I angered him with my rather assertive and bold introduction. I hope you'll forgive me, Mr. Pincrier.
The boldness I can forgive. You were getting in the way. You're apologizing for that now, I suppose, but...
No, but if I'm sorry for anything, Mr. Pincrier, it's that I regret I didn't have a wittier remark at the time. I often think about such things after the fact. That's all right, though. I think I'm pleasant company nonetheless. What do you think, Mr. Roble?
I am tickled. I feel like Mr. Roble, there's like a stutter that is like, and just ends with like, yes, get charmed, but like am off my game.
She says, my goodness, the famous Francis Roble, tongue-tied. I may have the upper hand even more than I thought. And Ms. Thop?
Oh, yes?
I sense a fifth passenger with us right now. Who are they? That I can't see them, but I can certainly feel them.
I don't think that that's anything you need to be worried about. However, I couldn't help but notice you have something of a weak slant on your M's. I'll pull the letter she had given me out of my pocket, or that she had left out of my pocket. And I'll say, here, I mean, there are people who give credence to that symbolizing any number of personality defects. I'm not one, but it is something you might want to tend to.
She says, very good, touché. I suppose you're probably wondering why I've been watching you all so closely, why I know your every move, why I know where you're going tonight.
Yes.
Mr. Pencrier is never without a plan. I can see his mind. The gears are spinning. He wants to know if I'm a danger. He wants to know if I'm in league with the things in the shadows. The
As long as you
answer...
don't get in the way of our bows or our swords or...
No. I have no intention of interfering with your work at all. I'm a great admirer of Hargrave House, in fact. And I'm a great admirer of your family, as I mentioned yesterday, Mr. Pencrier. And Mr. Roble, I've followed you, well, since I was a little girl. No, I'm here because I want to look at you all quite up close. I want to see you in action. Because I fear that some point in the future, we are going to be at cross purposes, at cross swords even. And I want to know what I'm up against. I like to plan ahead.
Is that all?
Oh, look. We're almost at St. James's Street now. Dear hearts. I can't wait to see what you do out there. The cult of the pig. Max, Mock demands a sacrifice of status. What does the cult offer him? Describe the manner of the offering.
I think what we see is that all of the folks that have gathered are like they have a big a chest, and they pull out a bunch of like theater garb, and it's very like fancy, like not operatic but almost operatic garb, and do a like a mock opera that involves like jumping from like mud tub to mud tub. Like by the end of the way they get through it, it involves a lot of like dancing and singing, and it looks kind of very mock but also very like movement based, and by the end of it they're just like flinging mud everywhere and have totally ruined what looks like these like really nice this really nice set of like theater attire.
When you arrive at 18 St. James's Street, Theodora gets out with you, and she follows behind you, but there. Mr. Pencrier, You've probably tangled with a fair number of ghosts in your day. How can you tell that this is the right time to strike this ghost? The house is empty apart from Irma, and otherwise it feels like you have the upper hand. How do you know it?
So a lot of more complex spiritual entities will be tied to specific like moon phases. But ghosts themselves tend to be a bit more like specific and like tied to the place in which they're at separately. And if you were trying to like track down a long ancient spirit entity, you would have to do that at the right time of the month. But for this, it's much more about almost the luck of the whole thing. And the moon is out, but at the moment that we step down from Miss Braithwaite's car, the moon itself is entirely shadowed over by one of two clouds that are in the sky at the moment.
And let's get a supernatural read on the situation. Liam, what do you feel as you cross the threshold into 18 St. James's Street?
I think one of the stark things to Liam this entire time has been the lack of a distinct spiritual pull on the house. And as we step in this time, what Liam becomes aware of is that this is not that there was no spiritual presence. We certainly know that from any number of ways. But this is a creature that is waking up from the nap that you take after a full meal. This is a creature that has been resting, fully sated, barely aware of us even intruding into the area that it and Irma consider theirs. And even at just this moment, it is starting to wake up, but it is still, and to our benefit, it is still in that groggy space between, but it is certainly present now.
Nice. And Francis, while the other two are sensing and making preparations, you're almost along for the ride in a way between the three of you. You are the first person, and right now the only person, to notice Irma. She is in the dining room. Her back is turned to the doorway, and she's hunched over with her arm up by her mouth. What do you do?
That was so gross. I think. I mean, I feel like my inclination would be to not approach at all because I don't want to start the show before Bran has like prepared correctly with how to deal with this. Like I don't want to like trigger the events of the ghost coming after us. So I think I'm going to try and like stay really quiet and also make sure that they don't stumble into the house without like being aware of what's happening. Like I want to make sure that like before they're looking around or going upstairs or whatever, everybody knows like
She turns, speaking to no one in particular. Her stump is unwrapped, and she says, "Got to keep the wound clean." The cult of the pig. Tony, Mock demands a sacrifice of blood. What does the cult offer him? Describe the manner of the offering.
every gathering of this cult, or at least on their highest holy days, as they gather together in this way, whoever has gained the most weight since the last time they were together is prepared, is trust, and is prepared as if they were a boar on a spit, and then brought in and placed deep into one of these vats until the bubbles stop coming, giving over their corpulence to the nourishment of all until the next time they gather.
Theodora Brathwaite places her hands gently on your shoulder, Mr. Penkrider, and your shoulder, Thop. And she says, I'm very, very excited to see you do your work. And then she turns and she actually takes your hand, Mr. Ropel, and she says, come, precious one. Let's watch them at work, shall we? And she guides you over to a big, comfy chair. I don't need any die rolls because you rolled so well on answer a question, so I just want the narration. What does it look like when you send the ghost on its way?
So some of the thing that's almost key about like entering the room is in the, because of the sense of reality that we're trying to deal with here, the ghost won't pass through walls. It won't leave in that sense. And there's a door and it's open, but we can close it if we smear it with a bit of blood in the symbol that the ghost itself expects. And typically Bran will just like cut a little bit down on his thumb or something to kind of get enough blood to smear. And as he goes to do that, he realizes that there's just a small line of blood just like running from his nose, which will then take up with his thumb and roll around in a big circle and a big spiral on the door. And knowing that the thing itself can't escape, I'll then invite Liam to speak to the body.
We see Liam as Bran is sealing the door and making a way for me to step forward, kind of square off against Irma, and like I pull a raven's egg out of my pocket, and as Irma steps towards me aggressively, we see that I think the visage of a ghost essentially resolve with where her body is at, and I smash this raven's egg on her chest, and we watch it kind of slop out all over the place, spattering along a wall. There is kind of a wail and a moan of pain. There's as Liam yells in another language for the spirit to depart, in a moment of hope that it will, knowing that it won't.
I'd like to interject briefly.
Go ahead.
Just mostly checking in with Theodora and Francis. Theodora leans close to you as this little procedure is going on, and she whispers, the veil is thinned. Can you feel it? The veil between worlds is almost as thin as this glove. And she raises your gloved hand to her lips and kisses the back of it.
Okay. It is always thin for me. And I'm going to remove my glove and pull a fresh one out of my jacket and put it on my hands.
Love it.
Um,
Please continue.
there's a little bit more of a guttural exchange between Irma and Liam, as it is very evident that Liam does regret what is about to happen before they draw the blade across Irma's throat, spattering the three of our clothing. And I say the three, I mean the three. I love the idea that Theodora is left impeccably unmarked by this, but we are far more soaked than we should be. Before then, we feel almost kind of a pop and a sucking noise as the spirit departs from this place.
That concludes the night phase. The threat is resolved. Let's pop on over to the dawn. Rewards. You get a reward because you resolved the threat. And so I will click on the... I think I can just drop an image into the chat. Maybe not. No, it doesn't appear I can. So instead...
If you drop it into Discord, I can pull it up easily for...
Oh, perfect. Yeah, let's do that. Just it's easier just to show you the rewards rather than try to read them all off. So where is my... Let's try that again. Sorry.
You can. This mirrors the silence of the house in the moment.
Yes, precisely. There we go. You'll get rewards, and so Tony, you can all see them in the chat there if you want to just pop over to the Discord chat. But it is a jar of ectoplasm. One of you can choose a jar of ectoplasm and add it to your personal quarters. One of you could choose a mirror that always shows a reflection of the St. James's Street ghost, add it to your personal quarters. If one of you had the cosmic passage marked, you could unmark it and reverse any effects and explain why the quieting ritual is making you less attuned to the supernatural world. I don't think anybody has a cosmic passage marked. Or you can choose a memento from the investigation, ask another hunter what it is, and then add it to your personal quarters. And the memento can be something implied. It doesn't have to be something we actually saw during the game. So, but everyone gets to choose a reward.
I really hope someone chooses a memento for reasons that will become clear.
I want somebody to choose a memento also, too. So that's great.
Memento. What is,
do we all just want mementos? Because that's okay.
I don't care about the memento. I want someone to pick it because I have a very particular idea. For
No, that's what I'm saying. So do I. And so
I think we have the same idea.
I don't know if we do. That would be fun to find out. We've been in each other's brains a couple times in this adventure. I'll take a memento.
Great. So I will take a memento, and Tony, you can tell me what your...
We'll let Sean go first since he said it first, and I'll just hope it's not what I was thinking.
So the memento that Liam ends up with is the wax doll that looks like Francis.
Excellent. It's not the same one, but I love that one. The memento Francis ends up with is the severed hand of Irma that still seems to live on a power of its own.
It still has
no
fresh
sentience,
blood
but will
on the
flex
wound.
and move, and is obviously still in some way, shape, or form tethered.
It's very good. I love it.
Oh God, so I'm gonna do the same thing. So I will also take a memento. In this case, Max, you must tell me what the memento I have taken is.
Oh, the kitchen knife for sure.
The cake knife or the one that chopped off Irma's hand?
Definitely the one that chopped off the hand. I think the cake knife has been
confiscated.
That's an evidence, right? It's in the evidence locker down at Whitehall.
So, and I had totally meant to pop these up so everyone could see them, and I have not. So let me do that now, so everybody can see how beautiful they are. I love that. Excellent.
Fabulous. Okay, so that's all the rewards. That's the first step of the Dawn phase. Next, we do the Dawn questions. Now, unlike yesterday, you all get credit for the first two because you did answer a capital Q question and you did resolve the St. James's Street ghost. So everyone gets the first 2 marks.
Woo.
Now let's go character to character. Francis, did you have an Echo in the Night?
I totally forgot they existed, so no. I was not trying to.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Did you appear in London in London society wearing risque or avant-garde fashion?
I did not. I wish I had.
Did you secretly show a vulnerable side to someone? I would say yes.
I would
with
agree.
Theodora, I don't know how secret it was, but I think she picked up on some vulnerability with you. Whether the other 2 did or not is not super relevant. So if you feel okay with it, I'm okay with you taking that one.
Yeah.
And I think that's 3 marks, which will bump you up to an advancement. So since you have 5 marked, you would pick an advancement from the list below. There are various things you could choose. And we'll move on to Liam. Did you have an Echo in the Night, Liam?
I believe I had 2, though I don't believe I get extra XP for having them.
No, just the one, but I'd like to hear them both, though.
One was the splattering of the walls.
Right, yeah.
The other one was the splattering of clothes. They were all splattering oriented. But one was animal matter being stuck on walls. The other was our blood, our clothes becoming coated so that they were unrecognizable. And so,
no, I love it. That's great. Go ahead and mark that. Did you have a face-to-face encounter with a dark entity? Yes, the ghost
I did.
at the end.
It's almost like I picked these 2 questions knowing
Exactly,
we might be
that's
headed
okay.
this direction.
Did you perform a ritual? Yes, you did. You had a great XP, great Dawn question sequence. So you'll get an advancement plus I think you have an extra XP or 2 as well.
Yeah.
And then let's go over to Bran. Did you have an Echo in the Night? Did you experience an Echo in the Night?
I believe I did, in that Max described the heads of the pigs with their noses still being daubed in the blood that had been used to stamp on the walls. And Bran's nose ran blood. He then used in the same.
Excellent.
As part
Very
of the
good. Excellent. Yeah, that's a perfect Echo in the Night. Did you loudly curse your family's name?
I did not.
Did you taste someone or something else's blood, sweat, or other bodily fluids?
I definitely tasted Julius's arm. Whether or not any fluids left it, I think it's
Fair. No, I think it's totally fine. Yeah, that's great. So you also get an advancement, and moving right along with the Dawn phase, we don't have any playbook moves to deal with. And then that just leaves unresolved Janus Mask prompts. I think we have at least 1 haunting still to narrate, and there might be more as well. I don't know.
I think it's just my haunting.
Let's have it.
I think we see maybe not even like a young Francis, but what Francis considers childhood might be a little different than everybody else. So a little, potentially a little bit older than everybody else. And before they knew what they were, so like generic childhood of being in some kind of like group with another group of children, and before they knew what they were, I think we just see like a montage of snippets of generic childhood things, and off kind of at like the peripheral vision is a different person in every group, like kneeling and looking towards Francis in the same way that they would later in life, but for a very different reason. I kind of envisioned like there was some ghost playing a trick on Francis, kind of foreshadowing what would happen later by like possessing like just people throughout
their whole childhood, and then kind of mimicking and mocking that kind of like reverence that would appear later on.
Nice. A little end of credits scene. Just because, why not? We see the three of you being dropped off by Theodora's carriage at the front door of Hargrave House. And the first thing you notice when you step out of the carriage is a severed hand on the flagstones. And you follow a trail of blood to what appears to be a head. And you go inside and you see what appears to be the torso of someone trying to escape, a look of sheer terror on their face as they died. And you find the entire main hall has been soaked in blood, filled with body parts. And Julius is standing at the top of the stairs. Sorry, things got a little carried away. And that will conclude our session. Let's go to stars and wishes. Stars, things we enjoyed both today and yesterday, the whole two-shot, and then wishes are things that you would hope to see if you were playing again, or if maybe we will get a chance to play again. I don't know. Yeah. If you maybe something you would have liked to have seen rules-wise or mechanics-wise, just anything really. Whoever would like to go first, take it away.
It was so good.
I'll also say, chat, if you have any things that particularly stood out to you. I know that I'm a T-Rex has been with us for both days, and there may be some others out there also too. Feel free to chime in, but don't feel like you have to. It was enjoyable to have chat with us and have people engaged the whole time. So thank you so much for that as a star for chat.
I have a couple, but the most recent one is for Tony, Thop being unfazed by what's her name?
Theodora Braithwaite.
I like internally, I was like, oh, well, that would galvanize Francis. Like, it was a weird moment where I was like, Francis is fumbling, and then Thop just being like, who are you? Like, whatever. In the carriage, just being like, you do not impress me at all. I was like, this is wonderful. I love this moment.
Thank you. From I'm a T-Rex in chat, how intense Pincryer was in giving Julius a taste of his own medicine. Roble and Braithwaite, especially the glove scene.
I love that glove scene too.
Gorgeous.
It was really good, just because it's such a nice callback to yesterday, right?
So, and also, started Jason on that. It was a great setup for that return also too.
I was fully prepared to get like flirtatious and sexual about it, because I was like, fine, we're gonna whatever. I will just, and then gave me the glove moment, and I was like, oh, absolutely not.
I was going to flirt, but no, no longer.
Absolutely not.
I love it.
I really loved how much today leaned into the gore, like with all of like the incidental things, but also just how all of us could feel exactly what was going to happen. I thought Emma was just going to lose some fingers, and the fact that
I knew that too. I anticipated that you all. I was like, they're going to think she's going to cut off a finger, so I'm going to go for a hand.
And I absolutely love that part of it. I wish if we were to play more, that we would see more of Francis's past, especially considering it's such a long past. I think that's really, really intriguing. And like, I don't think I've like explicitly said it on stream previously. I may also not have said it out loud at all. It's hard to tell. But the fact that the masterpiece is a cathedral is beautiful. I absolutely love that.
I mean, start of the game design, it's such a cool option. Like I read the options and got to the cathedral and I was like, yes, how could I choose?
Yeah. And it was one, like, I love plain long-lived characters because you can pull so many things out that are just so interesting, like different system but with some similar mechanical beats. Apocalypse Keys, right, by Ray, sorry, is tremendous. And I played one of the ancient characters that's older than humanity. We went to a place called the Oldest House, and I was like, it's the place I hid after the first destruction of the world. Like, being able to pull crazy stuff out when you're a long-lived character is just, and it's one of the reasons, like, I, even as a co-player, love having characters like that in the mix. And that's why I was like, it is fun to think about as I think about my character's past, especially since the scene I have to narrate is with my mother, to place an older character in there as long as that character is okay being placed there. It just adds a dimension to things that I think leans us outside of some of the supernatural, like the mundane things we go into that supernatural space a little bit more. But
yeah, I mean, further to that, like the length is interesting to me, but also immortality is really interesting when so much of like default game stuff goes into like physical harm and or loss of life is like what's really at stake. Like playing something that's like not easily killed is also like, then what is at stake? Like, what does this character care about if not physical harm, right? And it's a very fun prompt for me because it's like, oh, it's probably has something to do with like that I actually have to think about what they're emotionally attached to. And it might not be themselves, or it might be, their image or what they become symbols as, but like it kind of, yeah, those things are very fun.
Yeah. Another set of Call Me Billy is mentioning stars for Pin Cryer's intensity, but star for Jason really leaning into the gore as well. I felt the horror, especially in his delivery. I actually want to star Jason, and it is a culture that you and Gauntlet engender, but you demonstrate it so well also. And lots of times the culture that we're trying to create is in response to not the easy embodiment of that. And it may not be easy for you, but part of what made this such an enjoyable play space, and part of the reason that I was so excited to have Sean and Max play, is I played with Sean and Max a whole lot, which makes it easier to lean into places where I might be less comfortable. Because I certainly was touching on themes outside of my own comfort level, but with a group that I implicitly trust. And Jason, you make it so easy, both with tools and with writing, but also in your GMing style, for me to know if at any point I want to tap and say, no, I don't like this, like that it's okay. And that freedom actually allows me to push a little bit further. And I am always amazed listening to you and now playing with you. Your way of speaking is very paced. It's very slow, but the amount that you accomplish in what you do is it never feels like we just played for an hour when we take a break. It feels like so much happened in that space. Your ability to do the pacing, to allow that space for players' agency to develop, like creating that space and play culture, especially virtually, especially in a one shot. It's just tremendous. So huge star for that.
Oh gosh, thank you. It's really lovely for you to say. Yeah, thanks.
For Sean, I like it, again, you've GM'd a lot and you do there's some similar things that you do that are just tremendous, but it's also fun to then turn that around. And your comfort in playing on your own when the two of us were off shenaniganing the entire time, actually, like, that takes a level of comfort at a table that it was very impressive also too. Because I think in the same way that GMs tend to move people back towards each other, players oftentimes feel uncomfortable going off on their own, and they either take too much of the spotlight or they take too little of it. And you were so good at owning the spotlight when it was on you, and then giving it back out when it was time to shift that. And you just did a tremendous job. And Max, just seriously, just playing around with you back and forth and having shenanigans was super enjoyable. Especially because they kept on turning, but they led to that, like the church scene in which we got to have an experience of like, here's spiritually afflicted human, deeply experiencing humanity, and semi-divine human kind of wrestling with divinity paired next to each other. For me, as theology boy, I just ate it up, right? Even though it's like total subversion of normal genre for hypostatic union. Like, I love that as a narrative moment and as a moment of symbolism also.
Can I interject real quick? Because that's what I loved about that scene, for everything you said, Tony, but also what I loved about that scene was the fact that you set it away from the mass, like you were up in a balcony looking down at it. Like that separation almost felt like it felt really important, like thematically, to what the characters were feeling, which I thought was really, really terrific. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a like personal star to everybody, but I am usually very awkward about playing anything that has like that tends to be, I'm sure everybody can see this, but I tend to be a little bit like higher energy, a little bit more comedy, because like that's been a lot of the games that I play, and adjacent to the pacing conversation, I actually think it is a huge thing about the pacing, but like everybody being willing to let it be a little slower makes it easier and opens up a space for me to like take a moment if I not feel like I need to fill that space if I like haven't figured out what the like emotional or emotive response is in that moment, and so I appreciate that on everyone's front.
I think that's such an important thing. Like, back in October, I wrote a thing for a relatively new magazine called Never Mind the Dice Rolls, where it was 13 cheap tricks for good Halloween games. The 13th of which was air horn, because I love the idea of that. That's the cheapest trick I could think of. But like letting silences sit is something that GMs so rarely are willing to do. And when running a game that you're trying to make frightening, I think is the most impressive thing. I mean, even the fact that us three players genuinely thought that you were just pausing for easily 10 or more seconds at the point where you'd cut out. I think it's again, yeah, the same as Max had said, like, for us to be able to sit in comfortably in silence and actually feeling the fear and the discomfort, not of the silence necessarily, but of the thing that's been described. That's genuinely brilliant. And I think also the main reason I really enjoyed playing with you today, Max, and yesterday as well, because I play quite a lot of horror games, and the main group that I play, so I've got a group that meets every other Thursday, and we've been playing Call of Cthulhu for the last 3 years or so on. And we're not jaded, but all of us are big horror fans. And so there's very little actual fear at the table. And just there were a couple of points today where you're like, oh God, I don't want to know what's coming next, but I need to. And just seeing that was like, one, thanks for feeling that online. Secondly, I genuinely think it made the game so much better for the fact that we were all able to tap into that space.
I agree completely. And that's one of my stars. I could tell as we were playing, Max, that like because you said so, but also I could just tell that like you typically do like lighter, more funny like type of gaming, right? And so star for you for being willing to sort of like just sit down with this game, which has a very like particular kind of feel to it, a very particular vibe, and especially the way I run it, and sort of like slink into that kind of like dark, kind of carefully paced place, right? It is a different type of role playing, like in a world, I'm not saying this is what you do, but like in a world where like stuff like 5e, for example, is so predominant, and that sort of like very lighthearted like style of play is so dominant. I like that I've been able to bring 2 games now, which are responses to that, right? To like their response, like to say like, you can game like this instead, and I'm just happy that like we all sat down and got to do it. It was really great. Star for it's not really for anyone in particular, but just the idea that you all got to basically see just about everything the between can do in 2 sessions, right? Like you got to basically see everything, every type of mechanic, every bit of tech, The only thing that maybe you didn't get to see is like just the sort of escalating campaign structure with the mastermind. But even then, I laid it on a little thicker with Theodora than I normally do in session 2, just so that you could kind of get a sense of that a little bit. But no, I'm just really happy that we got to kind of show the between off really, really well in 2 sessions. I thought just really, really happy with that. Individual stars, I really loved Pin Cryer's Mask of the Past, like the servant being kept alive in the river to attract the monster. That was fucking ghoulish, and I really, really loved it. All the Janus Mess stuff was actually quite good from everyone. I really enjoyed the dynamic between Francis and Liam, and the sort of it started with that Sunday Mass scene, which was so terrific. Star for that. We've already talked about it, but big star for that scene. And that was just such an interesting, quiet scene. And the whole session, it all just sort of escalated, right? It sort of just kept escalating, like the sort of like emotion and tone of it all just kind of kept going. So I really, really love that. And a star for everyone like leaning in when it's probably wiser to lean away, right? In most cases, you all leaned in, so that was very, very nice. And yeah, I'm sure I've got more things to say, but that's kind of where that's for now. That's what's in my head. So.
Somebody said, I'm a T-Rex says, wish I wouldn't mind seeing y'all resolve the Limehouse liquor. Jason and I will talk because we both would love. I think we'd all love to do that also too, and come back and play some more.
Yeah, I'd be happy to run again.
We'll look at our schedules and figure out what is best for both +1 stream stuff as well as Jason's timetables and stuff, and do that. Not that that's the overriding thing. I mean, you just can play games with people, which is really what a lot of this particular stream was predicated on. And I love that our model is like, come run, and Jason's like, yeah, but if I come, can I run it? And I was like, oh no, that's what we would like. So yeah, 100%. I think we can make that happen. I do want to open the table a little bit for mechanical questions, because that's kind of a hallmark for us. Just to remind people, I think we've done a lot of what we would normally do in a reaction roll, so I'm not going to cheese it up by doing the weird transitions or whatever that I normally do, but
cheese it up.
No, Max or Sean, do y'all have any thoughts or any questions on the system itself, or things that you want to ask Jason about it? Because we actually had a lot of, like, somebody in the chat who had not heard of the Between who came in was like, wait, what system is this? Can people adapt it? Like, is it something, and was kind of chatting back and forth with them about it's if you want to look up, card from Brindlewood, it was going to be the closest thing you're going to find, but
people are hacking it like crazy. Yeah. And I think most of the hacks are coming from the Between now, more than even Brindlewood Bay. So yeah.
But I mean, having played a few Card from Brindlewood games and not having played Brindlewood itself yet, and then having played any number of PBTA games, I talked about this yesterday, but one of the comments on the design, how well segmented everything is. Like, oftentimes with Powered by the Apocalypse games or Card from Brindlewood games, I'll end up needing to look at 3 or 4 different large sheets and dissect what I'm doing at any given moment of time. The way that the Between not only takes that and makes things very compartmentalized, but then sequences where you're at in that, I just think is just such a tremendous design capacity, because it means at different points, yes, there is actually a lot of information, but I'm only looking at certain parts of it at certain times, and it's clear what those things are, and there's almost never more than 4 options to choose from, and that's just such a tight design space that it creates. So that's more of a comment than a question. But
Tony thing. Did the guy in the audience say, I have a comment?
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I say that, but I know that you talked a little bit about Brindlewood Bay. I think this is the question. You talked about Brindlewood Bay really was the thing you put out to figure out what the mystery system is for the Between. Was there anything in place for the Between when you had originally written it? What was in place for the Between when you had originally written it, or was it just kind of a big empty hole at that point in time?
Yeah, well, I want to kind of go back to your comment a little bit because you mentioned what you essentially said was structure, right? Like that
Right.
was the thing you were sort of commenting on, right? And I actually think that not enough game designers focus on structure. That's a criticism I have of a lot of game design in the role playing game space, at least. People sometimes focus on, mechanics, procedures, which I think are two different things. But you rarely get like design space in as far as structure goes. And I designed really intentionally for structure here. And so, yeah, that feeling of like the reason why everything kind of feels sort of compartmentalized and there's only a few things to have to pay attention to at any given time. The reason why I did that is because, and here, people in the chat, I know for sure have heard me say this before. Um, I believe in this idea of managing cognitive load.
Mhm.
It's a big thing for me, and as far as design goes, and it's something I'm really sensitive to because I run so many games, right? And so I knew with the between that I was asking a lot of players, right? Like think about just if the three of you just sit and think for a moment about all the story we accomplished in 2 sessions, like just all the backstory, all the encounters, all the clues, all this stuff that took place in just, 7 hours of play or so. Um, that's a lot to ask of people, right? And so managing the cognitive load is like really, really important to me as a designer. And so that's why it feels that way. That's where that structure comes in. It's so that you know what to focus on at the right time, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, here's the time when I focus on this, right? In the night phase, you get to kind of just like let the keeper take over a little bit because the keeper guides the night phase so much, right? So like that's all like super intentional. I'm glad you picked up on it. As far as your question goes, everything almost all the player facing stuff was there. All the playbooks, all the moves, all that stuff. Even the idea that it took place in there's like day phase and night phase, and it even had the unseen. It was called back then. It was called the um, back then. It was called the overseen, and then overseen eventually became underseen to play on the idea of like underseen people or something, and then I changed it to unseen.
Which is
Uh,
chef's kiss wordplay also
Right.
too.
I eventually got to unseen. Yeah, that's the best combination of wordplay and like what it actually is, right? And yeah, so that all existed. Basically the only thing that didn't exist and why I wrote Brindlewood Bay is I was just running the mysteries from my head. Like I was just like, okay, there's a child vampire. Okay, there's a ghost in a house. There, I just had like these and I was just kind of just running it from my head. There was nothing written down, and I didn't know how to translate that to other keepers. I was like, well, how do I make this something that other people can run? Like how can I formulate that? How can I present it so that they can run it? And they don't have to be me. And I knew that I wanted it to be very mystery focused, and so rather than rewrite the between 20 times, I just wrote a smaller game that became Brindlewood Bay to try out the mystery proposition. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm very curious because I've read the book up until the keeper part, and then just like did a little bit of a like I don't want to not until I've played it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read it afterwards. I'm just gonna leave that all mysterious for myself. And I am very curious about that because I'm usually the de facto person running whenever I introduce the game. I'm the person who runs it, and often find that there isn't enough scaffolding for what this needs to look like. And so I'm very curious about like what the actual elements of that are, right? Like when you say you're reading a list of clues and we had that moment of asking how much of a bonus could you get? I was like, how many clues are there? Like presumably there is not an endless list of clues, but maybe there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And having all that scaffolding for that is supporting both sides of it. Having the phases was really nice and ties in a little bit. I'm doing that thing where I'm commenting again. I just teased Tony about it. But having that moment where having the time phases and having prep for a future time phase, like having the Janus Mask trigger at a different time phase, is also one of those things that made it easier for me to be like, oh, I can take a moment and think about what a potentially emotive response would be, and I have time. I don't have to figure out what that looks like right now. And that doesn't always mean I had an answer by the time we got there, but at least it gives you time as opposed to triggering now, and that staggering of events is really quite compelling and just very nice to engage with.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah.
I don't feel like I've seen that many places where it's like, yeah, do this later.
No, I'm glad you picked up on that because that was intentional, obviously, and you know, I think what I think makes the Between stand out from maybe other games, even other PBTA games, is it was written by someone who runs a lot of role-playing games. Like I mean, I run games 3, 4, 5 times a week, right? And it's just my passion. And I'm not saying that makes me like better or anything, but I just have the way I run games, it's not with the same people. Like I just play with random people from around the community, you know, and in a year I might play with like a couple hundred different people, you know? And so, maybe not that many, but a lot. And I think that when I was writing The Between, I had the keeper section is like more than half the book. And it's because I sort of like am very into this idea of supporting a keeper and supporting GMs, and you know, and in the podcasting I do, like there's a big focus on like GM advice, right? And it's it just really comes down to like I've just played a lot with a lot of different people, and I kind of I wanted to take my experience of like what works at the table and mechanize it into the game, you know? And so pushing the Janus Mass to the dawn and dusk phase is part of that, because I know what it's like to put a player on the spot and I know that doesn't always work. So let's just push that aside for now and we'll do it later, you know? So it's that kind of thing, right? It's that cognitive load thing again.
It's very great. It's
Thank
wonderful. I'm very excited to run this now, having like played this. I feel like it feels like a game that will be. It feels much more digestible. Also,
you can do it. Yeah.
I think I could do this. I have to
you totally
figure
could.
out serious, but I think I could do this.
What's fun about the keeper section too, if you do get a chance to read it, is it switches voice. So the player stuff is very like direct and like almost like just a manual, and then you get to the keeper section and it's like me talking to you. Like it's like we're having a conversation, but only I'm saying anything. So
I constantly tell people like all that's in my GM section of my games are me telling you how I think a game runs well. Like, you know, like especially this game, but like I love that connected voice there of this is Jason talking to you about how to run this game, not abstracted advice from some theoretical person to a bunch of theoretical non-people who may one day read this book. I love it. So Sean, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not going to do this is more a comment than a question thing. I want to break the pattern here on the third attempt.
Sounds like you're making a comment right now.
Yeah, as is often the way in horror. But specifically, horror is such an intertextual thing, and obviously The Between very, very clearly like leans on Penny Dreadful, which itself is an aggressively metatextual thing. If you could recommend any person, as in someone who doesn't already have a background in horror, but if you could recommend them any horror medium, and by which I don't mean like spirit medium, although I don't know, if you do, I'd be very keen to hear that. But either a book or a play or a film, what do you think the single recommendation for horror should be? And this isn't what do you think is best, but what do you think it should be? What's correct?
That's a really hard question because I'm a huge horror fan. Yeah. Huge horror fan. I'm much more like despite the fact that The Between has a lot of literature inspirations, its biggest influence is TV, and I'm a big TV and movie guy, and I love horror movies. And I don't know about like a specific recommendation other than to say I think a really key important component is that there has to be the slightest element of camp to it. So even something like my favorite horror movie of all time is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and very scary. Like it's got some very tough sequences, lots of great tension, terrific camera work, great movie. Something that gets maybe less focused on in that movie, and what I think makes it so good, is it has this like slight camp element to it, right? Like the sort of behavior of the family, like there's, you know, the sort of like cannibal family members, they're so goofy and weird. that little bit of camp is important in horror because I think it's an invitation to enjoy it, right? I strongly dislike torture porn, which was very popular in the early 2000s, and I felt very alienated from horror genre at that time. I dislike it because I don't think it has that sort of like that little wink, that little wink that says you can enjoy this. This is not a big deal, right? Like you're welcome to enjoy this, right? It just feels like bleak and relentless, and so I don't really love it, you know. So that's a big part of it for me. I just like that. I like that little bit of camp. I like nostalgia that's like sort of put on, you know. Like there's a movie called The House of the Devil by Ty West, which came out in like 2007 or something like that, and it has this like very intentional, almost aggressive, like 80s horror vibe, you know, and you know, like but that's like the invitation, right? So I like for horror to like invite the viewer into the enjoyment of it and not to alienate the viewer. And I think a little bit of humor or a little bit of like winking quality is like really, really important. I wouldn't say Penny Dreadful has that, except the existence of the Dorian Gray character, who is played in a very big way by the actor, in my opinion. And Ava Green's just like, sometimes, I mean, it's so over the top. Like it's amazing and it's wonderful, but it's like so big and so over the top that you just have to like not laugh, but like you're just sort of like you're just like in a delirious state, like, wow, this is happening right now, you know. And I think that's the key, right? I think that's what makes horror work. I think it's what makes it work at the game table, you know. Like I try to inject the levity at the right moment, like the little repeated ringing of the doorbell at Hargrave House, right? Like that little sequence, right? It was a setup, you know, to introduce Theodora, but it was just like it was meant to cut the tension as well, just a little bit, just to kind of like,
I loved it.
you know, to kind of give it a little wink.
And it is like knowing when to be like, hey, I want to say this dumb thing in the middle of our game, or hey, I want to drop it in our Discord message that I really want to say destroy this vampire right now in a suggestive way, but I also know that that'll subvert the intensity of this current moment, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to go type it in Discord. But no, it was tremendous to watch happen. It made me think a lot, like, and I probably will circle back around and maybe see if you and I can set up a time to talk about this off camera, like, because we talked a little bit yesterday about the connection between OSR and story games and the emergent narrative realities and some of the other things. And what OSR games do very well is let you expand out in any direction, whereas story games put a lot of that stuff on rails. It's because they want to say this is the type of story we're going to tell, which is great and is what they should do. That's not a critique of either type. But you lose some of the benefits of that structure, especially when you're trying to invite players into doing things like paint the scene. Like for Down We Go, one of the things I realized at one point in time was if I don't know how to telegraph something, that's actually totally fine. I can turn to a player and say, tell me how you know this is about to happen, and just let them tell me how their character knows this is about to happen. Like it's one of the most freeing things you can do as a GM, just to be like, oh yeah, I don't actually have to have all of the answers. And the way the Between is written constantly structurally tells you to do that and reinforces that. And I think I think any game in which you have a flow, and I'm a big fan of like game rituals. And so like the opening and the closing pieces, the dawn and the dusk elements, like I think every game benefits and every plate and every table experiences benefits from having its own experiences of ritual at the table and in play. And figuring out how those two things fit together, your play culture rituals and the game rituals, is a huge part of a system singing to you. Anyways, it made me think a lot about, even within my own GMing technique, as well as a designer, what are places I want to give more specific suggestion or instruction to say, here are rituals and flow and structure pieces that you can incorporate that will not only invite this, but give you space to do it every single time. So if somebody doesn't want to take you up on it, that's fine. But how do you give that space? Because I love that like XP is tied to building narrative motifs in the system, right? So like working in Echoes of the Night is reinforced, and that strengthens a player, especially a player who's new to role playing's ability to start to do those things on their own, regardless of the system they're playing. And we all love those moments at the table where something mirrors something else. And so anyways, I was thrilled by that. And that's I'm not even gonna try to make it a question. You can respond to it if you want to. But again, I think more games would benefit from that. I think Between is the best example that I've seen of that.
I would respond in this way. I think there's a version of the Between that doesn't have the prompts to invite the players to build the world, that doesn't have paint the scene, that doesn't have the Janus mask, that is just more about that's looser, that doesn't have the structure and the scaffolding. And I think that game would probably be okay, especially if it had the same playbooks. It would probably still be really fun, and you'd have a good time. That game is probably Monster of the Week, if I'm being honest. Like it would probably be fine, but I don't think that it would be the same experience. And I think that the way it's written now, there is a richness and a texture that I don't think you'd get, you know? I mean, because again, I invite the three of you to just, after this is over, to just ponder everything that happened in the last 2 sessions, like just in terms of the game's texture, in terms of the themes and the subtleness and the grotesqueness and just the sheer amount of stuff that got accomplished. I'm proud that the game draws that out, you know? But yeah, it is one of the things that makes this style of gaming different from the OSR, though. I think you're right. I mean, in that the GM does not sort of like deliver the story to the players, right? But I think there's a lot in the Between for OSR people to enjoy. And in fact, I'm doing a Twitter thread on it tomorrow. Like why OSR gamers should try the Between, because there are things I think that like OSR gamers would really like, especially on the GM side, on the keeper side, like the way the scenario, like the fact that it's scenario based for starters is a big one. And then also, you know, like just lists and tables and things, you know, I think there are things like for OSR people to enjoy, the sort of the very like quite sudden danger, right? Like the fact that the characters, we didn't see it with this group, but the night move especially, the result can be the character just dies, right? They just get disemboweled or destroyed or whatever, right? And now they get rescued by the Janus mask, but there's still this like the spirit of like, you know, characters should be vulnerable all the time. I think that's something OSR people would like. So.
No, I like I said, and you've read it, but it's also evolved some since then. Like Down We Go is player facing moves, right? It frees the GM up to own things, but it also, like Laura's Loot is like, tell me the answers to rumors. I'll put that in that goes into the world, which is similar, but again, it doesn't have the current structural elements. And it made me think a lot about that. So I'm super looking forward to that thread. Like I said, it still feels
pretty different from other OSR systems I've seen, though, as far as that goes. I remember reading that and thinking it feels much more narrative.
Yeah. Well, and even like trophy is like, and I can't wait to get you some DWG stuff for.
Trophy. I was going to say trophy is really, really like
that's where it sinks. Right? Yeah. So, Call Me Billy says, do you find those player facing narrative moments engage the types of players who aren't normally the ones to take the spotlight?
Is that a question? Or
yeah, that's from Billy. So yeah, you find those player facing
Yes. It's partially because I don't give them a choice. I'm like, okay, we're gonna paint the scene now, and I just wait patiently until everyone speaks. But like, but no, I think that's right. I mean, I think what makes it work is that I don't know. I think what makes it work is pretty much. I think it again goes back to the structure. Like the players only have to like speak about the one thing they have to speak about. You know, I think that's a big part of it. It's not like you are having to juggle a bunch of stuff and worry about a bunch of like, you know, like your backstory. You can just not even worry about that at all because you don't get to talk about it anyway, right? Like so I think that's probably part of it. I also think that it just I think the way the game is set up, like sort of sets a certain expectation about how it's going to go. So like when you're first making characters, if you'll recall, one of the very first things you do at the beginning of the game is everyone else has to say what is in the personal quarters of the other characters, right? So from the jump, you as a player are creating things in the world. You're creating details that have mechanical weight in the case of personal quarter stuff. And so I think that's part of it. Like, it's just a certain expectation is set early, and then it just keeps reinforcing as you play.
And it can be hugely confidence building for new players. But I also, like, even though you want everybody to talk, when Max at one point was like, those were the two things I was going to talk about, so they've been said, it was like, okay, great. Like, we know that you had the opportunity.
Yeah, in that case, it's like, okay,
and,
fine. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Well, so, and also to kind of get to Call Me Billy's question, or kind of from a different way, sort of implicit in the question is like, how do you handle like maybe players who are accustomed to a different style of play, right? And the one thing that I think that I regret not putting in the rule book, it's not in the rule book, sadly. It's there by implication, but it's not stated expressly, but I would like to change that at some point. One thing I think is really important about the between that should be emphasized with the group, and this is especially true if you have like players who are accustomed to more traditional role-playing games, is you have to explain to them the characters literally cannot die. like they only die if you want them to die as a player. If you get to, you always keep them alive. Like the Janus Mask will save them every time, 10 out of 10 times, right? And until they don't, right? So, but for the most part, especially in the early campaign, the characters cannot be killed. So permanently. So just push into it. That's the one, like when I talk to keepers who have like groups that are more traditional in their sort of role-playing game experiences, that's the one thing they always tell me is like they were so timid, like they didn't want to go press into those dark places. And it's like, well, you have to like make sure they understand that there's no danger. You are, it's nothing but reward for pushing into the dark places. So, yeah.
We could probably talk all day, but I want to give Max and Sean a chance for final thoughts.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say, like, as the person who is often sometimes hesitant to like take up that space, those things did that, right? Like, I'm not a new player in any way, shape, or form. Like, I've been playing role-playing games for like 2 decades or whatever, but like there are lots of things that I haven't role-played, right? Like, there are lots of games that I have played, and then there's lots of characters that I haven't role-played, and some of those are comfortable and some of those are not. And those like player-facing questions do prompt the like, think about it. And I think that if you're like, for me, it's like if you were a player worried about being put on the spot like that, I would be like, no, play this game because you have time and space to think about it. I also think that that's like a play, like a play culture, like a philosophy of a table that you can also just apply to any game, right? Is like give people time to think.
100%. Yeah.
Like you could just put that in any game you want, but because it is like kind of formalized here, it does like open up a space, even if it's not, oh, I'm uncomfortable because I don't know how to play a role-playing game. It might be like, actually, I just want to take a moment and think about this because it might matter. Is very cool. Like, and it does really, I don't know, it feels like it makes it very easy to take up that spot.
Sean, any final thoughts?
Yes, and this is very much a linguist's perspective on it. I really like how The Between as a game is so full of the definite article, the. We've got the vessel, the legacy, the dusk phase, all of these things. And it really lends a certain immediacy to it. It isn't just, it's a night, it's the night. And that's just so gothic. It's wonderful.
Awesome. I had a blast playing. Like I said, I hope we can get back here more. And again, I want to stress to people, I would love for you to support everybody who's on this stream. But if you are a designer out there, if you're a player, if you're a GM, any of this has sparked something in you, I want to just encourage you to go check out the work that Gauntlet RPG does. I would say there are a couple of organizations and individuals who have really helped push forward what the indie RPG space looks like right now and what some of the best practices in play look like. And I would really name Gauntlet RPG and One Shot Network as two of the biggest ones in that helps shape an awareness of the way that you can have these tremendous experiences at the table across the board. I'm always thrilled by, and the work that Gauntlet does tremendously impacts what we do here, from safety tools to play-oriented approaches to any other number of things. So in addition to creating great games, they play games first and foremost, and the great games they create really unfold out of that. And I've always loved talking to Jason about that. We've done an interview before on it. And anytime it comes up, just the fact that things are rooted in that is so huge. So please, if you are not connected to the Gauntlet, go out and get a little bit more connected. I would encourage people to support them financially if they can, because it lets great things happen. But there's no trade that happened between Jason and I to get me to say that. I just think it's true. But either way, even if you can't, get involved in the community, get connected with other people, play more games, have a blast, and go check it out. I'm going to drop all of our links in just 1 second. Sean, if people want to be able to find you, where can they do that?
So the easiest way of doing that is by searching Sean F. Smith. The F stands for Frederick. That's a slight secret. Very few people know that.
First time I'm hearing it.
And yeah, so it's easy to find on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Just add a few more underscores as you're part of the way there. And yeah, have a look out. That's how you can easily spot me.
Awesome. Max, where can people find you at?
Maxwell Lander with only 2 L's, even though technically to spell it correctly would be 3, but it looked weird. So only 2, Maxwell Lander everywhere.
Awesome. Jason, where's the best place for people to find you at?
I'm on Twitter at Jason Cordova 6, all one word. But I do really recommend you follow the main Gauntlet account at Gauntlet RPG. We also have a publishing account, which is at Gauntlet Pub. And if you want to follow Brindlewood Bay specific stuff, it's at Brindlewood Bay.
Awesome. Until next time, you can find us at +1EXP. We're inviting people right now to go to ttrpg.link /13H. That's for 13 hunters to check out the game that we're going to be launching on GameFound next week. It's actually not a game. It's a system agnostic supplement about bounty hunters. There's a few spreads for each of the 13 hunters. Tremendous art, phenomenal things, anything you'll need to drop them in. And we'll be playing that on the 12th in the afternoon with Dom. I'm going to be running it in Through the Void, our sci-fi version of that. So if you want to see how I start to pull different narrative triggers in an OSR system and check out a bunch of bounty hunters, come back on the 12th for that, because that's what we'll be doing. But until next time, we're just going to wave at the camera until I take us all off air. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us. All right, and we are clear, except for I didn't turn off my audio. Hello, everybody.